So would somebody like to make a motion?
Yeah, make a motion that we close whatever we opened and adopt the budget. Is that good enough?
We're not adopting it, we're just
We're
gonna
just
close the public.
Close the public hearing.
Just close the public hearing.
I need a second on that.
Second.
Okay, thank you very
That
much.
will close the public hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've opened our
We gotta make sure
RDA
exactly
public
what it
comment,
was.
we have now closed that portion for any public to comment on just the redevelopment agency portion of the budget. So I will need to do a roll call vote on that. So Kim, you want to call them out? Okay, I will then. We'll start right next to you. How about Mr. Morris?
Aye.
Okay. Smith Edmonton.
Aye.
Son.
Thank you.
Aye.
Thomas.
And don't repeat the last part of my name.
There you have it. It's unanimous that we close that portion of the meeting. So with that, we can now come out of our redevelopment agency meeting and go into our regular work meeting. So I need a motion to do that.
That would be good.
I gotta be legal, you guys.
So moved.
Okay, thank you. And seconded.
Second.
Okay. We'll give a
Aye.
second to Councilmember Roberts on that one. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. One down, two to go. Okay. Gotta give Kim a minute here to make sure she gets the right recording going. You good? Okay. All right, I'd like to welcome you all out to our regularly scheduled work meeting for the Layton City Council on June 1st. We'll start out as usual with any of our council reports. So council members, do you have anything you'd like to share with the group?
I have a number of items, but I will be brief. The majority of them come from CTC. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that there will be a Parents Empowered private event launch at Surfing Swim. That has been scheduled. You should have received an email. It will be on Saturday, June 10th from 7 to 10 p.m. We do have an invitation. There's a code to register. You can bring your immediate family with you, and it'll be similar to the kickoff we had at Sequest when we did the one last year. And there are just a few updates with CTC. Elisa, her last day was last Friday, May 26th. But the highlights I wanted to provide were just some of the things that have happened over the year. So Circle of Security, we finished a parenting class. There were 14 adults that completed that. And I'll start up again in September. Learning to Breathe was in all of the 6th grade classes, and those that weren't in session, or excuse me, the first half of the year, they finished up in fall. And they'll be offering an additional session, 2 of them actually, I think one in North Salt Lake and one in Kaysville for any 6th graders this summer who were not able to attend, whose parents want them to attend. And there will also be a launch of a junior high school program this coming year. So TJ Barker, the Shoreline Junior High Principal, he's offered Shoreline as the first pilot school for the junior high program. And then there was also a community-based program for adults, and there were 10 people who attended that and completed, and so that was successful. They also completed 2 strengthening families classes within the past couple of weeks. And there were 12 families that graduated from that. New classes, again, will start in September. And then there were some SDS grants. They were grants that we applied for to offer to the elementary schools. They were $2,500 mini grants that allow the schools to implement programs that will increase the pro-social opportunities for kids. It improves their skills and recognition within their schools. And they also have to include a parent workshop with that. So we have 4 local elementary schools that will be participating in that. And yeah, that's it for now. Oh, the other last thing, I guess that's the big thing is.
Well, the other last thing?
The last thing,
The last
that
big
is the big thing.
Okay.
The last big thing.
Is that I did meet with Amelia Williams last Friday, and we had a discussion about our needs in the city for CTC, and they have agreed to post the job for a full-time position for our prevention specialist so that we continue our Layton CTC. I did discuss our concerns, which were not having kind of that scaled approach where it could go up or down depending on how many residents we have. And so I think we've come up with a pretty good method. We have about a year to come up with what it actually looks like, but I offered some in-kind opportunities that we're actually already doing a lot of, and a couple others that are an easy lift, which would be specific to like our social media marketing that we do with the city, posting things on our calendar like these workshops that I've just mentioned to help get the word out to more of our families and our residents. And those come with a monetary value attached to them, which I feel confident that we can get a majority of this dollar amount that they want from us. We can get a lot of that done on our social media piece and some of our meeting spaces, things that we've already participated in. And then lastly, maybe some partnerships with some of the businesses we know for maybe some of the in-kind food, because most of these workshops are in the evening and they are for families, and so they offer food. So there's some opportunity here for us, and Amelia was confident after our conversation that they could post this job for us. So I think I'm feeling pretty good about it. We have time to kind of work out what that looks like, but I won't take up more time today with regard to what some of those in-kind things could be, but just wanted you all to know where that is. Question?
Who helps serve that food?
They have staff. There are prevention specialists who do a majority of what we need, but in the past, if they didn't have enough person power, then that specialist had to handle all of that stuff too. And so that's part of what we're hoping to.
That's where the committee really needs to jump in and
You
help.
could have families
Mm-hmm.
do some service and come in and help serve.
Yeah, so like I said, there's lots of opportunity in that sense because we have over a year to kind of plan out what that looks like. But I just wanted to make sure that we could get our full-time position in before yesterday. So,
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your dedication on this, working through it. I mean, those are some good solutions.
and they're willing to work with us, so. Okay. That's it.
Anybody else?
Kinda.
Okay.
I'm trying to think how to phrase it. Anyway, a group of JCs.
No, the old.
Yeah, I mean, the
I shouldn't say it that
JCs
way.
no longer exist,
The previous.
but the group still meets together once a week for lunch. I didn't, kind of ran into them and then found out what they were doing and that. But one of the gentlemen, he wasn't a JC, but he was his son. He's my age, and they're trying to not resurrect it, but they're trying to gain information about it. For those of you that don't know the JCs, they were the lifeblood of Layton City. They did everything. They did the 4th of July. They did the parade. They did the booth. They put up the booths every 2 nights before. And there's no, they helped build, what's the ball field?
No, Steve.
Starkey?
No, the other one.
Starkey? Wendell?
Wendell Snow. I mean, that's what, they were a real vivid organization in Layton's history. And so they asked me a couple of things, if I could do it, and I said, no, I can't make decisions like that. But I suggested that maybe that we get some information, which I have this guy getting, and you do a, what do you call it?
Proclamation form.
Proclamation form.
Okay.
And if we, around the 20th of July, because I said, what about this Thursday, next Thursday, not this one? And they didn't think they could, they're reasonably old. But anyway, so, and then from there, they would take July 20th, if that be the day, whatever day we do, and then they would celebrate it themselves each year. And they are, I mean, they gotta be in their 80s.
Yeah.
You know,
That was pre-Parks and Rec organization, but
Yeah.
they used to plan everything in
I
the city.
mean.
They
yeah,
did the
you-
8 hunts,
Yeah, I mean, they did anything that happened that now the city kind of is either run or quit, they did it. And they weren't like businessmen, they were just people, you know, that said, yeah, I can do that. And that's, so anyway, I think a little recognition for those that are still living, and maybe down the road we could do a plaque or something, you know, and I don't know what you'd put on it, but something that kind of recognizes, you know, what they did, because they really did do a lot in that. So anyway, that was,
Okay.
I'll get more information. I told them to get it to me so we can put something together, so.
What does JC stand for?
It's JAYCE. I have no idea. But I will say, the one guy, Jones, what a name. Anyway, he was saying they were #1 in the state for like 10 years. And then they were #1 in the nation.
they won some
For
national
one-
awards on
for
on
1
floats from Layton.
So I mean,
I know
you
that
know,
much.
they were a pretty good group. I mean, I worked here in the summers doing ball diamonds, and the guy that ran the rec program, Starkey, he says, we're gonna start a junior boys, which was like JC's only for boys. He says, you're gonna get me 20 guys here Thursday. So I got 20 guys there, and we started junior boys. It didn't last. I think it only lasted a couple of years, but that was, they just, the more I talked to these people, the more the stuff they told me that they did, and I'm like, wow. They basically were the city, anything besides paying bills and stuff. So anyway,
Okay, well, thanks, Vic.
yeah.
Anyone else? If not, then we'll go ahead and move on then to item number 2, which is the proposed amendment for the municipal code on landscaping. Simple way to say this, so Chad, I'll let you kind of
Sounds good, perfect. Yeah.
enlighten us on all the, what the deal is here.
Well, yeah, thank you, Mayor, Council. I know a lot of you received phone calls and emails from various Layton residents about this. This is a potential update to our waterwise standards for single-family dwellings, specifically in the city. I want to just, as we start this conversation, I want to just go and just quickly review what we've done so far in this arena. So you'll remember in 2021, some of you were here at that time when these were adopted. These were waterwise standards that were adopted in June of 2021. Before, if you look at this left-hand column, we used to require a minimum of turf area for various developments. So you can see in our BRP zone, which is our highest requirement, we used to require 25% minimum turf in those areas. Didn't have any limit on some of these other areas for turf. So in 2021, we flipped that. We said we're not going to require minimums anymore. We're going to say there's maximums for those. So we have a maximum requirement for multifamily and commercial and industrial 15. Same thing, we really reduced that to 15% from 25. Townhomes, again, maximum. And then we said in areas besides these single-family homes, we're going to talk about that a lot in a bit, but for commercial, industrial, multifamily, business park, townhome, all those types of developments, PRUDs, you couldn't have any turf in your park strips or in your landscape buffer areas. Anything that was less than 8 feet wide, essentially, you could not have turf in based on that new ordinance. So that was step number 1. Step number 2, all of you were involved with. This was just recent. We had an amendment that adopted some expansion of commercial use standards related to bringing, it's an incremental standard for bringing landscape into compliance. There it is. You all saw it just a few months ago. And just want to get some feedback on this. These are some things that have happened in the last few months since that was updated. We've had neighborhood Walmart, the space station gaming over in Marshall, About Time, Intermountain Healthcare. All those places have come in. They've met that standard. They've been willing to meet that standard. And while there's always a little bit of concern about extra cost, all of them have seen the merit in this. We haven't had a lot of pushback on this because our feeling was this is a reasonable approach. In the case of Walmart, just to give you a case study, we have a requirement, you saw that percentage up there, So they chose to redo some of these areas that were turf here and here. We don't necessarily choose the place for them. They can choose where that landscaping is installed, but that took out a lot of turf, and we've had that replaced with water-wise landscaping. And again, it's been a success based on this commercial remodel that they're doing. So those are two things that we've done already. We're here tonight to talk about really this program. Weaver Basin Water has a turf replacement rebate program that has been introduced. You all know that there was a big news conference back at the beginning of May. There's some things in this language: participation requires communities to adopt strict requirements, is right from a letter they sent to us earlier this year, but it says that no more than 35% of the front and side yard landscape areas in new residential development can be lawn, and then you can't have any of those park strip or areas that are less than 8 feet have any turf in it as well. So I want to talk about this a little bit, and we've had a lot of interest in this, of course, because there's a rebate out there, but there is some nuance to this issue, and I want some of the emails that we've received from the public have said, essentially, why did the city drop the ball on this? Why weren't you on this? Well, there was a choice made. This was a policy decision made by some of your predecessors back in 2021. This was a purposeful choice to exclude these areas, and I want to talk a little bit about why. So this is just the rebate program. I won't go through there, but a lot of people, when they find out there's still requirements, you can't just tear out your turf and put all rock in. They sometimes are a little bit less excited about it, but we can go through that if you want to, but that's just the steps and the things that they require. It requires an inspection, requires they submit landscape plans, etc. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the reasons why at the time we recommended that maybe this was not the best bang for our buck. So we've seen a trend, and this trend has been, this is the last 4 years, we've seen it kind of trending this way for a while though. When we adopted the standards, we concentrated on those areas, the single family PRED, townhomes, apartments, and of course commercial developments and those types of things. But speaking of residential specifically, you can see the trend. Our trend over the last 4 years is that those PRED developments and apartments and townhomes have gone up. Now it's important to remember that PREDs still have single family uses in there. They're not always just all townhomes and apartments. So there are single family homes, but those were already swept into our 2021 change. And you can see that the largest percentage of residential that we're building right now in Layton are already subject to these water-wise standards. All of that close to 90% there in 2023 so far. This number at the very end is based on the approved platted lots that we have out there that are in the pipeline. So that's the numbers right now. Of course, if new numbers came in, we could change that if somebody came up with the standard single-family lot subdivision. But the trend, as you can see, has been less standard single-family and more of this type of development, which allows us to already sweep them into those requirements with the ordinance. Now, why did we choose to not sweep those single-family residential dwellings in there? There was a couple of reasons. One was that, and these were discussions that were had back in 2021 at the Planning Commission and at the Council. One was we wanted to allow those standard single-family residential lots to have more flexibility. All of these other types of developments, the landscaping is installed by a master developer. It's part of a development agreement. There are plans that are submitted. Landscape plans are submitted by a professional. Those landscape plans are then implemented by a developer before occupancy of the homes. In the case of single family, that's not the way we do those. On a standard single family home, the landscaping is at the choice of the property owner. Those of you that have moved into a single family home subdivision recently know that we give you a year to complete your landscaping once you've moved into that home. And that's to give property owners the ability to choose what they want to do with their landscaping. A lot of the developers that are developing those standard single-family home lots don't want to be involved in landscaping, but it's also just a preference. Many of the people that move into a non-PRED, non-homeowners association subdivision do that on purpose. They don't want to have that those restrictions. They want to have that freedom. So this was a discussion that we had back at that time, and there was a reason why we didn't include that. In addition, we saw that the biggest bang for our buck came from these other application types. We saw that we were going to sweep in, like you can see, at the time, close to 75%. We've moved up to close to 90% of the new homes already included in the ordinance that we adopted. So here's just what we did back in 2021. These are the standards that apply to get the rebate. The letter that we received from Weaver Basin didn't include this bottom standard because we already do that. We've done that since 2021. But what we did was we said, hey, we encourage you to meet these standards, but we don't require it. We took off any kind of restriction on implementing a water-wise standard in a single-family home, but we just don't require it. So anybody, if they wanted to voluntarily, could go out and still meet these standards. They could go out and remove turf from their park strip and replace it with something else. You can see on these other columns, these are already all compliant with those standards. So again, our approach in 2021 was to encourage, to take away any impediment to implementing that, but to not require. I'm going to get into that just a minute. Those are the actual standards that we've proposed, or that were taken to the Planning Commission as a possible change. So just want to talk a little bit about this. Really the reason for this potential amendment would be to qualify for that rebate. We feel that the measures that we've already taken in the last 2 years are really those things that are going to have the biggest impact on actual water savings. That might be different for a different community, but we feel like in our community, based on what we've seen in the trends, that's where you're going to get the most actual water conservation through the measures we've already taken, just because of the way things are trending. One additional concern that we've had all along is that anytime you adopt a restriction on someone, that does give them less flexibility. So there will be less flexibility for a future property owner in a new single-family subdivision to do what they would like to with their landscaping. They're going to have, based on, if we decide to change this, there will be restrictions on them. Some people might be just fine with that. Others may say, well, we want to have that flexibility. Interestingly enough, our planning commission, we had 5 members there the night this one before them, early in May, and it was a split vote. It was 3-2. We had 2 members that just felt like the single-family homes should have the flexibility to do what they would like, and that from a policy standpoint, they didn't see that the benefit was enough to justify the change to that. That's what it comes down to. It is a policy decision, and whether or not that trade-off is enough, that's, I guess, for you to decide. One thing that has concerned us about this from the beginning, I didn't mention this, but it should be mentioned that Layton, because of our 2021 changes, we were one of the first, if not the first, community in Davis County to qualify for the flipper strip program because of the changes. Now, the change at that time was that we would have, we had to take away any impediment to removing turf from the park strip. We couldn't require turf in that park strip anymore. There had to be options for people to be able to do other things, which we said that's a great idea. We did that. So this is a little bit different, and now it's a requirement. We have a requirement. So that's where we're I guess we don't have any problem if the council feels like this is a good policy decision, but we also want to make sure that you understand that this is not a decision that has no consequences on future property owners. There will be, we're sure that there will be folks that will see this as a taking away some flexibility and some freedom that they had before to do what they want to in their yards and gardens. With that, I can walk through really quickly the actual proposal. It's pretty straightforward. So the proposal before you tonight, if you choose this potential change, it would be to, again, limit the amount of turf grass in a single-family yard, front and side yard, to 35%. One thing that came up, that our current code requires, it does require a minimum of 50% coverage of plant material in the front and side yard. That doesn't mean you have to have 50% turf. It just means 50% plant materials. As we took that through the Planning Commission, their feeling was that this should match what the minimum requirement is from Beaver Basin's requirement. That's fine. You want to just make sure that the council knows what that means. If someone was to come in and do the minimum turf requirement, or excuse me, the maximum turf requirement, which would also be the minimum coverage standard, this is what you'd result in. They could potentially just do turf and have the rest be rock and other materials. If this was to be left as it is at 50%, then you'd have to do some additional landscape materials in addition to your 35% lawn to meet that standard. Now, again, this was something that the Planning Commission talked about. This particular one, they said, yeah, we think it should just, for simplicity and to match, this should be 35% rather than 50%, which, again, is there anything, I mean, this is just a policy decision, right? This is what you could get. This is what you would have to do if you had the other standard in place. Related to that, they did
question.
Yeah,
On the 35%, can you go back?
Uh-huh.
On the one on the right, obviously there's no additional
Yep.
shrubbery
Plants.
or whatever, but could they do it?
Yeah, that's what would be allowed under the,
I mean, that's basically the least amount you can do.
yeah.
But they could go ahead and put in trees, do whatever they
They
want.
can still do more, but that
Yeah,
wouldn't be
they just can't have more than 35% in turf.
in turf. Yep, that's right. So this would require that additional landscaping. This one would still be able to do it if they wanted to, but wouldn't require it.
So Chad, this went a little different than I thought, because the document said you guys supported this, but it doesn't sound like you do. I came in not supporting it, but it said staff supports the planning commission's recommendation, so has the staff changed their mind on that?
I think we have always been of the opinion that if this is something that the council feels is a good idea from a policy perspective, then you know, that's something to consider. If the reason that we're doing this is just to qualify for a rebate, I'm not sure that we are in support of that. I think if you decide that this is a good policy for the city, then I think that's where we're at. And that's the same conversation we had with the planning commission. We actually shared this presentation with the Weaver Basin folks too, because we do feel like, and we said that to them, that we have already, like I said, done the things that are going to make the most difference from a conservation standpoint, which should be the goal, right? So
There was I think there's some internal inconsistency with their policies, that they would say, we want you to flip the strip, and you guys make sure you can have nothing in there, as long as it's not like concrete and all that stuff, you can put rocks or whatever. And now, because they're saying that was under the idea of water, that we want to conserve water, but now
They want water.
they want water-wise plants inside, which is just, to me, it's inconsistent from a policy standpoint. My thoughts on this was, I don't like the ordinance. I think that we were there, three of us, I guess, when we made the decision that we wanted to carve out this big single-family homes, because, for the reasons you mentioned. And I don't think that it's fair to have 3 or 4 or 5 individuals in the city who want to qualify for a rebate, shepherding in an entire policy change for all the single-family homes in the city. That's not how I don't think that's a good policy it's very inefficient, unequitable, I don't know, there's lots of words for it, but it doesn't seem like the right approach. That me and my neighbors in my single-family development, that if there was a brand new home built next to me, would have restrictions on them from some policy that was designed simply so that someone in another area of the city could qualify for a rebate, that may not actually have an end result that has better water savings than the way we're leading it right now.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at on it. And Clint and I were texting about this earlier today, so you can share what you want, but I'm not in favor of the ordinance. I think we should just leave it as it is. And we will allow them to qualify for the flip your strip. We made a policy decision. I would not be in support of the ordinance as it's currently written, pending discussions with you guys, but that's where I'm at.
You had mentioned the flip your strip, that they came back between the planning commission and today, Weaver Basin did, and said, yeah, no, you can still,
They seeded that.
yeah, you can still just do rock and not have plant material. We're still okay with that for flip your strip.
No, I think for
That's
this,
the current standard. So the way that and actually the planning commission felt this was important, that if we were to make some changes, and this was the previous council that somebody were on, there was a lot of discussion about giving people the freedom to have no plant materials, but again, their minimum standard for the turf replacement is 35%. This was, again, talked about at the planning commission. The idea is that if we're going to do this, we ought to still have some plant material requirement, the park strip as well, which would match their coverage standard for the rest of the lots. That was discussed. I don't know if that was the question, Clint, but
I was, back in 2021, I was all on board, flip your strip, because you had the option of not having water. That was the big thing. Like, no more water. Why are we watering park strips? And now we should water park strips.
Just
you
a
should
little
put plants and
we need 35% water.
And a drip system. I know it's different. It's less water. So that's one thing.
so they don't require any plant materials in the park strip right
So
now.
it changed from what the planning commission heard. That's what it's talked
It did, so what
Okay,
what we found out is that they had changed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they basically gone with whatever the city requires, and right now we don't require plant
for
materials.
flipper strip or for this buyback. Second, I guess my other concern is you started with the commercial businesses that have remodeled and then, okay, yeah, as part of this, you've got to work on your landscaping. That part for our residents, if they want to, in the future, want to do something in their yard and now all of a sudden they're subject to this new standard. To me, that seems.
Yeah, so that kind of thing, a redo of landscaping voluntarily would not require compliance. This is on new residential
I looked in
construction.
this, because there was mention of that in the minutes, but I looked in the actual ordinance, there wasn't anything
not that.
retroactive.
No, it's not
Is that right?
Yeah, I think there may have been a misunderstanding from some of the planning commissioners, but it would apply just to new construction. You can see up there, the new construction's the applicability. There would be, I mean, potentially if someone was to completely raise a home and put a new home up in their new construction, but any kind of remodel it doesn't apply to.
It's only new.
Only new.
Not remodel.
But when you look at the telltale numbers, as far as that 4.9%.
Yeah.
You're right.
Two more things and I'll be quiet. First thing is that I know that when homeowners build a new house and they're in a single family and they look at bidding out these projects about how much stuff costs, guess what the least expensive option is for tenants?
Turf.
It's turf.
Yeah.
And so I don't like the idea where we have home prices increasing and costs increasing, that we're then going to be requiring them to implement more costly water-wise landscaping. It's really not gonna, it's a drop in the bucket for the actual water conservation that we're doing, but now we're imposing it on these single-family homes, when in reality, they're not really the problem. So I think there's been a lot of policy that's been directed at like homeowners, granny watering her roses and she's using too much water and that's why we're running out of water. And I just haven't really ever liked that idea because I think it's a lot deeper than that. Secondly, I want to make sure that we're sending good messages to people that if you make decisions on where you live, like you said, Chad, that when I lived in a townhouse, I didn't care about the landscaping because I wasn't paying for it. It was whatever, right? And so that's where we can get a ton of water savings, and that's why we made that policy decision. But in the single-family home, my neighbor, Cameron Cross, he has no plants in his front yard, zero. It's just all, it's not just water-wise, it's zero-scape. There's nothing there. That's a decision that he made. And I would worry, I just don't want to restrict people's ability to
Do what they want.
do what they want with their houses in these specific areas. If you don't want to do that, then you can move in other areas in PORDs or whatever. But in single-family areas of the community, I think we should allow them to feel like they're still single-family homes. So that's my feelings on it. I just think that it's not equitable to the people who will actually have to pay for these types of landscaping.
So, I was gonna say, you're shooting a hole in the rest of the presentation here.
No, I didn't have, there's nothing else. Yeah, we just have some text that we're done.
These guys have their say, I just.
There's also a policy, and you guys touched on it, you guys have touched on it, a policy decision that seems to us to be inconsistent or inappropriate, whatever word you use. So this program, this is my opinion, this program was described as a carrot, but it's really a stick camouflaged as a carrot. If that makes sense. And so what they've done is they've given the resources to the conservancy districts, which are federal agencies, and given them the ability, this unilateral ability to decide what standards will be met in the communities that are serviced by that district. We have a great relationship with Liberation. And then, instead of saying, as an individual homeowner, regardless of where you live and what the city's policy is, if you want to meet these standards, we'll give you money. The stick comes out and they say, no, the only way you will let your residents participate is if your elected officials change the standard across the city.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's a political, I think, given the sponsor of this agenda, it's a mandate it's a stick that's camouflaged as a carrot. And so here you have, and to my understanding, this is the standard they come up with today. What if we adopt it, let's say a city adopts it. Next year, they may, in order to participate in this program, they've added an additional standard. And they're gonna come back to the city perhaps and say, look, Alex, we're not gonna do it for you because your city needs to adopt this new standard. And so you have, if one of the federal agency, in effect, and they're good people, something negative for them, who are basically leveraging, making decisions, policy decisions that should be made by the elected officials of that community, right? But they'll say, no, we're not doing it, you don't have to do it, except, yeah, but you're punishing, singling out, discriminating against, whatever word you want to use, against Layton residents because they don't have a citywide policy that conforms to what you're saying should happen. And none of you are elected officials representing the city. You know, you'd think if it was really only about conserving water, they would say, we don't care. Anybody that's willing to do this, we'll give you the money because we're trying to do it.
Yeah.
But there's a political agenda, and it's just a policy, we just think it's and that's why.
That's kind of the way it was pitched in the legislature.
That's why our approach is from water conservation, we support it. But the approach that's taken has some real trade-offs, and we just wanted to try to make sure that you were aware of those, because it's not always pitched that way by the residents that understand that. There's some larger issues at stake, and we wanted to aware, if you were aware of them, and we just wanted to try to communicate those. And it sounds like you already were, which is good, but that's the concern.
So, I was gonna say, I guess I know the answer, but so why not just allow the people who want to do it, like city to do it, and work with Weaver Basin and not worry about the ordinance change? Because what they want to do is noble, and they want to save and conserve water, and they want to, I mean, you have to, this is a lot of work. This isn't, we're going to give you a check and go ahead and figure out what you're going to do with it. You've got to do the work first, and then it's reimbursed. It's not just free money given out. It's a project, and if it's a project and someone's investing their own money into it, why change all of our ordinances for that? I mean, it just seems like.
That's the
What's
agency
the
that's
reason?
in control of the
Yeah,
funding,
yeah,
and that's the problem.
We asked,
It's just,
basically said they're not
it's
willing to do that.
counterintuitive.
Yeah, I mean,
It really
we've had some really good, respectful conversations with Weaver Basin. We've had that question, like, you know, what, can't we just implement this? And they basically said, no, we need to have this adopted. That's the requirement. We actually went through this entire presentation with them and showed them that we feel like what we've done already is the biggest impact for water conservancy, or water conservation, excuse me. But again, one other thing to keep in mind is that this was what they had proposed to us 2 years ago. This idea of 35% maximum, they respectfully requested that we include that in our ordinance at that time. And again, this has all been respectful conversations. We said, no, thank you. There's some other issues here that are at play. We just don't feel like this is right for us to, just what you said, to make this requirement that would kind of create an uneven playing field, especially where we have mostly PREDs and other types of developments happening in the city now. So it's been a long conversation, but for them, there have been cities that have adopted this, and they're on their website. You can see them. There's cities, quite a few cities in Davis County that have. There's some of them that are very different than us as far as the developable land that's available in the city. Some that are similar. So again, it's just a policy question.
Another question: if let's say we adopt it and subdivision's created somewhere, it's not a PRUD, it's just a normal regular subdivision, and they decide to start an HOA, which the HOA take precedent over these, how would the HOA says, nah, we want turf, we want.
Yeah. I think that this whatever you choose to do tonight is gonna if you decide not to change this ordinance, they're gonna do whatever ordinance they were under when they were approved, or whether they decide to form an HOA after they were approved, that's kind of up to them. But it's gonna be whatever they decided to do when the subdivision was approved. So if they in other words, if they
of their approval from the subdivision, they would have to follow this if we adopt this.
That's right. If they did organize an HOA, then they could potentially just sweep all those in anyway. But that'd be up to them.
My other question on this is, how do you enforce it?
That's our concern. So when Alex and I were talking earlier today, it's let's say we have my classic example is the retired couple that doesn't They're not up on our ordinances. They buy a single family lot, builds their lot, they have a year to put their landscaping in. We do everything we possibly can, stamping plans, putting notes on titles, whatever we could do, but somehow that doesn't get to them. They install their 100% lawn or 80% lawn or whatever it may be. And then they have a well-meaning neighbor that says, wait a second, that's way too much turf for our neighborhood. And they call us up, then that would be on the city to go out and say, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, we're sorry, but you're gonna have to remove turf from that area. And for us, that's just, we can't conceive of that being a good thing at this point, especially where, you know, if someone has a PRUD where up front we have landscape plans approved, they're moving into that knowing that this is the waterwise landscaping, that's a completely different story than someone that buys a lot, let's say they do a custom home, let's say the builder builds or constructs the lots, they buy it, has a custom builder that comes in, it's not even the developer of the subdivision, and builds them a custom home, they do their landscaping and have no idea, despite our best efforts to try to let them know. And that's something that we just feel like we're setting ourselves up for some very upset phone calls to you as well, right? So
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Two things, if I don't forget the second one. First of all, we are in a situation where Weaver Water, they're the biggest, I mean, most of our people use Weaver Water, right? A little bit of Davis, a little bit of whatever.
Yeah, we have, they provide a certain area of the city with secondary, and we have a contract with them for about 50% of our culinary water.
Culinary too, okay. So that's on an agreement, so that changes. I don't know how long, if you do 3-year agreements or 5 or 1, I don't know, but it's gonna go up. Can I say that?
Yeah, the water contracts, they're long-term contracts, they expire at different times.
Yeah, and water is becoming more expensive, okay. And as you look around the city now, how many people have flipped the strip? I mean, why? You know, I mean, I did. Why did I do it? I did it because it cost me less money. It didn't cost me less money, really, but it didn't cost me more money because I don't want it. And I think if you look at the way which people are thinking about things now, they're looking at ways to save water. I mean, as I drive around, I see side yards, which you never saw a side yard have rock in it before, but now I do. You know, I see front lawns that are, some of them don't even have grass in them. You know, it's all rock and a little bit of shrubbery here and there. And so I think the design is going there, but to tell people you gotta do this, that's, it's not even the percentage, it's just I just don't feel comfortable with it, you know, because it's, you know, I look at my house, I mean, I did things to save money. I think other people are gonna do the same thing. And they don't need a stick hanging over them to say, you know, and for somebody to say, oh, we're not gonna give you the break because your city's not doing it, I'd send it back a note that, never mind.
I just have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So for the 3 of you who were here when the ordinance was put in place the last time, how much of the decision to do that was around the Flip Your Strip program? Was more of it about conserving in general, or was it really to meet that requirement?
Actually, it started before the Flip the Strip really came about. And we had that whole idea of conservation.
Dawn
Really drove it, but I mean, it was before that really became an item. So.
And then Flip Your Strip came about, and that's why we were already so far along the
Yeah.
process of our ordinance, that when that came about, we were the first one.
Yeah,
who could
like
get
that.
it.
And we worked closely with Weaver Basin on that initial, this was something that they had read all of our and again, they respectfully asked at that time, hey, we noticed you didn't include this, would you please include that just as a request? And we explained to them, well, no, we have a desire to give those single-family homes more flexibility. But yeah, flip your strip came after the process had been started.
Yeah, we were waiting.
And that's what I
on
thought,
that.
but I just wanted it to be openly spoken, because I agree that putting in an ordinance to help people meet a particular requirement is a lot different. And so the last time this was done, it wasn't about meeting the requirement, but the requirement came and helped out, which is fine. But to do something in order for you to get a discount, which I get, we all love them, I do too. But that just, I wanted to just understand that. And that is what I expect to take her, so thank you.
Any other discussion?
First, accolades to the planning commission, and it looked like it was a good discussion by reading the minutes.
Yeah.
If Michelle took the minutes, accolades to her as well. I got stuck on the 50% and the 35%. And looking at that diagram or those examples that you had up there, it reminded me of maybe an unintended consequence. You think about a xeriscape or zeroscape around a home, and I've read a lot of science reports, whatever, that those homes are going to be warmer, and it's going to cost more energy to cool them. So if we're going to 35%, they put it all in turf, we're still using more water. It's going to have a cooling effect, but you imagine the mature trees and shrubs that are going to shade the hardscapes. That's going to cool that home, and we might use less water on the one on the right, but they might be using more energy to cool their house. And I don't think we're making a step forward. We're just, I don't know if it's a political decision to say, oh look, we're doing this, we're saving water, but it's costing our residents more in another aspect. So that's my hang up there. I remember in the discussion in 21 talking about park strip and trees or water-wise plants in the park strip, and I remember good reasoning, but I don't remember the exact reason. Can you talk a little bit about why the city requests it?
We actually support it. When we understood at the time, we had a good discussion about that, and we had the council at the time felt very strongly that, again, there should be flexibility and they shouldn't have to put in planting materials in the park strip on single-family homes. However, commercial and multifamily, all those, we do require that right now, and there's a lot of good reasons. That, for one, we can't have complete hardscapes out there because of those heat island effects. There are some aesthetic considerations. Any kind of planting is actually going to keep those gravel mulches in place to some extent. One of the things we noticed in my previous life in Bountiful was that on those really steep Bountiful hills during those August monsoons, if someone had just gravel, many times that gravel would go right down the street because of the volume of the water. If you had plantings in there, they would hold those things in place. So there's that reason. There's filtration of water that occurs with plants. Plants, the right kind of plants, water-wise plants in a park strip can actually, you've all started to see, I'm sure, out in some of those flip your strips, park strips, that over time dirt will fill in those rock crevices and you'll get little weeds. If you can get the right plants in there, they'll outcompete those weeds. One thing, they'll provide coverage, but they also provide root systems that will take water away from some of those weeds and outcompete them, so it becomes much easier to maintain those park strips. So there's a variety of reasons why we still support plant materials in the park strips. Turf is the wrong answer in those narrow strips because there's so much water waste, but with the right drip system, it's very little water use and it does have some benefits to having plants out there. So,
thanks.
Chad, so Bountiful, they're on the list as a community.
They adopted it, yeah.
Do you know when they adopted that, and it's similar to this, or is
It was a
it?
few months ago. It's the state, they just adopted the standards they needed to qualify for the rebate. They were
So it was recent, it wasn't?
Bountiful's one of those communities that's a little bit different from us because they're predominantly infill development. There's not a lot of new single-family residential. We still have some potential for quite a bit here, so.
Well, it's just frustrating because I feel like from the political leverage aside, it just feels like we've always been very conscious about water. We've been out in the forefront on this issue. And now, if, it seems like we're all in kind of agreement this isn't the direction we're gonna go, it's just kind of an unfortunate consequence that we have to be seen as the people who don't care about water conservation anymore. That's just,
Actually, no,
I don't like the
we're
idea.
respecting the property rights.
Yeah, and that's how I feel.
And that's really
That's
the
how I
answer
feel it, but
here.
it's just putting us in a position where we're a different city than Bountiful because we're gonna have a lot of new development with new homes. And we're just carving out, 4%?
Yeah.
We're allowing 4% of our residents to continue to build what they want. That is not as if we don't have any issues about water conservation. So it's just unfortunate because it feels like we were on good, I don't want to say we don't have a good working relationship with the base water. You guys do that full time, but to be put in a situation where we have to make a decision that's best for the city, that some could construe as being thumbing our nose at water conservation is just unfortunate.
Okay, I
Thank
feel
you.
like we've discussed this enough. Are you guys good so we can move on? I mean, I know you have to have the discussion so you feel good about the vote that you take, but we do have a couple more items that we need to get to.
I was just going to say this, maybe I'm interjecting myself or shouldn't, but I think that, I don't know what you're thinking, obviously, but I think there are several options, right? One of those, you don't have to act on this ordinance. You don't have to vote against this ordinance. You can table it. You can say we want to do additional study on it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think you have to deny it. Does that make sense? And there's certainly nothing that restricts us from going back, if you'd like us to, and talk with Root Basin and try to help them understand more clearly from, not just from staff members' perspective, which is important, but from the council perspective. These are the concerns that we have. What possibilities are there in modifying the approach? Again, this idea that if there are residents who want to do this, why would you not make that available to them? It sends a very important message that you're discouraging. You should be worried about discouraging it unless it's, take the political stuff out of it. You want people to conserve water, yes. Then why would you require everybody in the city to adhere to this and not just invite and entice and incentivize those who want to do it? There's a lot of people who do, but and then we can bring that back to you and then just let it do what you want. I mean, let it can die, wish I could act on it, but that's not a suggestion, it's just a thought.
That's a good
Because I
idea.
don't think,
That's good.
Wasn't there something in our packet that identified the discussions were still going? So I just heard you say, Chad, that you went back to them and they were like, we're not interested. But I thought I read somewhere that you would ask for clarity on some things, and some of that hadn't really been clarified fully yet.
We asked for clarity on the park strip requirements, so we got some clarity on that. That was what that was referred to.
Just that piece,
Yeah.
okay.
But would their hands be tied with the money, the money from the legislature? I mean, I appreciate going back to them, but I imagine them saying, yeah, but the money's here and the money's tied with there's strings to that money from the legislature.
I think there are, but my understanding is the districts get to set those standards.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think they get to set.
Okay.
I think it's another example of the one size doesn't
Yeah, it's a
fit all.
mandate type deal for all of us.
Look at the data that Layton City has done as far as water conservation.
I
Our residents should qualify.
It's the same, apologize, it's the same, to me, it's the same approach as housing affordability. There's a problem, and people south have determined that there's only one solution to that. And if you don't apply that specific solution, you don't get contributing to the problem. This is the same thing. If we want to conserve water, there's a multitude of ways to do it incrementally. It doesn't have to be only one way, but this, in effect, is saying, no, our definition of how you conserve water is to do this specific way to the detriment of what could be, right? It has to be, if that makes sense or not. There's that same approach that isn't positive, because there's a lot of people who people that will do it for the right reason.
Right.
But
Well, those that are
without the
interested,
side
they're
impacts.
interested because they want to do it for
Sure.
a reason, or they're thinking that it's gonna be easier to have rock instead of grass,
Yeah.
but anyway. Okay, I'm gonna, we need to move on. So it's a good decision, I think we've got good direction, guidance for later as well.
Thanks, Chad.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you,
Chad, that
Chad.
was good. So I'm gonna turn the time now over to Tracy for the utility billing on single-family rental properties.
Great job. We'll try to make this one really brief. This is just discussion. It's okay, so we have time.
Okay,
for the-
we've got, and then we've got, I think at this point, if you guys are in agreement, maybe number 5 will wait for that. That's fine, so we wanna make sure, you can take the time and we'll make sure that Parks and Rec has plenty of time too.
We'll go quickly.
Well, I can give you the quick version of this. What we've got in a situation in the city, and I apologize I didn't get the total numbers of this, but you have a number and a growing number of single-family residences that people are turning into rental properties, right? And so when someone becomes a landlord in utility billing, the way we have handled it for a long, long time is you can have the tenant set up their own account. And so when they do that, the tenant gets a bill, the owner gets a what we call a landlord copy of that bill. So problem number 1, we're spending double billing, right? We're double the printing, double the postage, and so a couple of problems that the landlords have is that every time that changes, we charge $50. Well, there's a big process, and without going into all the detail, we read the meter, close off the water, send a final bill.
New tenant.
Every time there's a new tenant, yes, sorry, did I say landlord? Every time there's a new tenant. And the other problem they have with it is because we shut the water off so that we can get an accurate read for that tenant, if they want it back on to do cleaning for a month or a week or whatever, we put it back, we charge them $50 and put it back in their name. And they have a real problem with that. But the reason we do it is if we don't, they don't tell us when the new tenant comes in, and then nobody's getting billed for the water. So that's the reason for, it seems punitive, right, to charge 50 and 50 and 50 every time it switches, but we discovered very quickly a long time ago that if you don't, then they don't bother having the new tenant come in, and nobody's paying for the water. Anyway, I already said that. So what we're proposing is that we no longer, I'm giving you the very brief version, but our proposal is that we no longer allow tenant accounts. That someone buys a property, the bill is in their name, they figure out how to deal with their tenant, and the reason that helps us as a city is we spend far less resources dealing with these entities that are money making.
Yeah.
It's like a business. If you own a rental property, that's a business. And just this last week, we had someone who their tenant didn't pay the bill. We called the landlord, you're responsible, we do have it legally set up, so they still have to cover it. And their first question was, well, now you're gonna send them to collections, right? No. Why are we involved in managing your business? You collect your own money, right? So that's been my argument for a long, long time. We've never really thought to bring it to the council. The reason we thought to bring it to you is just because you will probably get pushback, right? From every landlord that's single family landlords. Your duplexes, fourplexes, apartment complexes, those are all billed a different way. There's one meter, they figure out how to divide it up, in a large apartment complex, in the rent, even a duplex. We tried to identify, are there any that have 2 meters? We're pretty sure there aren't any. They all have 1 meter. So the landlord already has to figure out how to split that up. But anyway, hopefully that's enough.
I remember getting an email from one of the landlords that's stating that Kaysville or someone does it differently. So how do they?
Right. So this all sparked from an email that you got. It's been an issue ongoing, but then you received an email, and that's what started. And theirs was, well, you should just automatically shift it. They have the problem with the $50 for putting it back in their name, right? Kaysville, you just leave the water on and you put it back in my name, and then when I get a new tenant, I have them come in, and then it gets put in their name. Yeah, that's great, as long as you force your tenant to come. Well, I guess that the landlord in that scenario, which was my third option up here, was exactly that. If we automatically switch it to the landlord, don't charge the $50, they're paying for the water, so we are getting paid. In my mind, that still highly favors the landlord, the property owner, and so forth. And so why, as a city, are we willing?
Why do you look at it that way though? Because I mean, it's getting paid.
The bill gets
You're
paid.
having the landlord sign up front that they're responsible
So
for
the
that
one-
anyway.
So the one thing that they do over there is they charge a large deposit, right? We don't do that anymore because we had an issue with just dealing with deposits all the time. We do on commercial properties, but not residential. But the problem you get with that is there's not a clean cut for the tenant, right? So I go
But
out.
again, that's on the property owner's management.
It is.
So it eliminates the city. It's really up to the property owner.
Well, it kind of does, except for the attitude, right? The attitude of people is still, there was a tenant, the tenant's paying the bill, the tenant doesn't pay the bill, what are you gonna do about it? We get that every day, all day. Every tenant that's ever lived in an apartment in this city, I would dare say, I mean, nothing's 100%, but we have a few in the city that own 40, 50 of these homes, right? And they are on the phone with us every day. Every day we hear from these people about what we're gonna do to help them manage this situation. I'm like, and I don't see that changing just because we automatically switch it back to their name, right? But
The challenge is we get inserted, sorry to interject, but not Chad, but Tracy, we talked about this a lot, is we get inserted by default into the business relationship, the financial relationship between the landlord and the tenant. And our view is we have no business in that. We don't do that we're not involved in that middleman to make sure it gets paid or doesn't get paid with any other residential property in the city. If you own a business, you manage the books of your business. Tracy talked to their clerks out front who manage this, and they said, correct me if I mistake this, but more than 25% of their time of their entire time is dealt with dealing with this one issue. So the resources that the city, provides for the benefit of the.
Providing property management.
Pardon?
Yeah.
You're providing property management to these landlords.
Right, and it's not, it used to be in the old days, and this was put in more than 30, 40 years ago, so predated all of us, but back then, there were probably just a smattering. In the whole scheme of things, it wasn't enough to worry about, but now it's become an intentional business that's exploding with Airbnb and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's just gotten to the point where we just think you've got the taxpayers of Layton City that are paying for a benefit that very few individuals are doing it, and it's completely disproportionate what they're contributing. And we talked to a lot of other cities to see, are we thinking outside the norm? And there's a smattering. Cities like Ogden, I think West Valley, others, they long ago said it's all landlord. We don't mess with the tenants. That's their problem. And we have others, the smaller cities that still have the more accommodating approach.
They're
because they just don't have that
where we
many.
were 30, 40 years ago, the smaller cities.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, as they grow and large, like what we have, now it's exponential. I mean, we're dealing with it 25% of the time when we should be dealing with it.
Well, there's
if you
no
look
doubt
at
it falls on the property owner.
Yeah.
I mean,
If you look at a
that's-
single family residence, someone comes into the city, they buy a home, on average, they stay in that home 7 to 10 years. 7 years, let's say, we deal with them one time. They come in, they fill out an application, we drive by their house, we read their meter, we send them a bill, they pay it, done. We don't interact with them unless they want to switch their garbage can, which is a whole different thing. But these tenant landlord relationships, we could deal with those multiple times a year. I mean, so I'm figuring over 7 to 10 years, we've probably touched that account and change it and send people out and read and bill 7 to 10 times as much, right? For that
It's
situation.
not just the office work, it's running a truck
Yeah,
and reading a meter, shutting it off, turning it on. And so there's multiple trips, not one trip in and then one trip out to do it.
Do you count your options
Yeah.
So we can see it.
And so I can send this over to you. So this talks about the current process and the fact that, you know, there's a $50 application fee in and out. Just the fact that I talked about, you know, renters only stay about a year. We send out double the bills every month for these people.
In a single-family home? I don't, that doesn't sound right, but really?
What's that?
There's that big of a turnover in the single-family rental
I think in
Yeah,
any
year-
rentals, there's
I
a
mean,
lot, yeah.
yearly?
Tracy, do you have a,
Wow.
do you know approximately how many rentals?
I forgot to get that number. I had it on my list of things to do, and the treasurer's been gone this week, so I've ended up being treasurer and utility supervisor.
Wouldn't you, how are you gonna resolve the landlord-tenant billing?
Keep it in the landlord's.
Well, one option that you have is that
Okay.
a landlord can choose to receive their bill by email. I mean, to me, I would suggest they all just get it by email and you forward it to your tenant if they're gonna pay it, right?
That makes sense.
And they all just say
Stays in the-
current resident or
Yeah.
something on them, so that, you know, for the
And you understand why the landlord would want that, because they forward it to the tenant decides they're not gonna pay it, then the landlord has to pay it, they almost like, hey, it's your bill, it's in your name.
Yeah.
But that's part of what being a landlord is, and so.
Well, and you have the ones that abuse it, when here we are trying to conserve water, and they're out there spending $300 a month watering them, you know, doing whatever, and now, instead of the normal $79.
I don't think anyone's in favor of keeping it, right? Okay, I know I'm not, so.
Yeah.
What are the other
I
options?
just think, I just want to know what the options
Yeah,
are.
I mean, the other option, so the first option is continue to do what we're doing. The second option is to eliminate all tenant accounts and it's just in the property owner's name, right? They can choose what address they want to send to. They can have it emailed to them, whatever. The third option
And that would
is,
phase in over time, so any existing accounts,
so I would
You would leave
propose
them
that we
alone?
could do that, right? So as they switch, we'll just inform people, look, now we're moving it to your name
Yeah.
and that's where it's going to stay.
Yeah.
You know, we don't need to go up and disrupt the whole out
That-
part
that- that's what I
all
was
at
saying.
once. But just over time, as people switch out, then we'll just tell them, all right, going forward, this is how it's gonna be. And the third option was kind of the Kaysville approach, which is just basically continue doing what we're doing, but we'll benefit the landlord by just auto switching, you know, back to them.
So that's why I wanted to see the options. On option 3, why, if you were to allow the unlimited switching situations, why wouldn't you still just send, or maybe scrap that? Why wouldn't you just mail to the person whose name it's in and then email it to the landlord? Like, why do we have to send out double bills? I guess
In our
that's what I'm
system, it either is, you either choose email or mail. So if they're currently doing email, then we email it to both. If you're mailing, we have to mail to both. There's not an option to do one to you and one to the other, so.
And so if it's this option, then you still send out the double bills.
No. It-
So option
on
3, you
option
would not
one,
send out double
No,
bills?
I'm not.
on option 3,
Yes.
yes, we would.
So
The only thing that
that's what I
changes
didn't-
with option 3 is the interim between tenants,
Right.
right? So that we don't charge the extra $50.
That's what I didn't understand.
And we don't shut off the water, but we're still setting up a new tenant account, we're still going out and reading the meter. You know, we're still doing most of the things except,
You're not charging.
You don't charge
there's,
to-
it is a little less expensive for us to not do that. But at the same time, based on the email that was received, it's a horrendous benefit for landlords, meaning we're more involved in managing their property.
Question, how would the tenant really know how much the water bill is? Like, I would think I'd wanna know.
If I'm the tenant, I want to get a copy of it from the landlord, right? So you're either going to get an email and forward it, or he's going to scan it and send it to you. I mean, I guess,
Would option 2 be bringing it more in line? You referenced duplexes, fourplexes, other rentals. Would that be bringing it in line with that
Standardized.
process?
yes,
Yeah.
because those are all billed, just one bill to the owner or property manager, whoever manages the property, right? They work that into the rent. I mean, in those cases, I don't think the tenants see a bill or anything. It's just part of their rent because you really have no idea who's using how much.
The way I see it, if you're renting 1 unit or 20 units, it's a business.
Right.
And I think it ought to be the same.
Okay.
Okay. You good? Alrighty.
And I can email this out to you if you want to look at it a little more.
Just add the numbers when you get those.
Oh, okay. The numbers of
How
those.
many
Yeah.
of these houses have one?
Okay.
Okay, let's, hurry and tee up our Parks and Rec and hear about Liberty Days.
Mayor and Alex, we could bring this back next council, if we would prefer.
Would you be, so you're gonna need quite a bit of time, is what you're
No,
saying?
we'll try to go quickly.
I just move to cover what we can, that's okay.
I just said get the information.
Yeah.
4th of July is coming quick.
Yeah, I think I wanna know what's going on myself.
As long as it's not
So we'll go quickly through this and we can send this information out so you can look at it more closely, but we've been looking at this for a year now since that unfortunate tragedy in Kaysville last year. And so we'll move quickly through it. I think a lot of this is common sense. We are changing the parade application process. We're updating our safety policies, and we're also making some changes in our park. The parade entry application, we are moving from just accepting everyone to an application process. And so once those applications are turned in, then they'll be evaluated by a committee that includes staff and commission. And then we are targeting 45 to 50 entries to make sure that we get the best and highest quality entries. And then during the parade safety measures, we are asking for parade monitors with each of the parade entries. And so each entry will have to bring parade monitors to help make sure that the policies are in place and that safety is primary. The vehicles will drive in the center lane. There's a 10-foot no pedestrian buffer around the vehicles and 30 feet between entries. A lot of these things are going back to the things that Mr. Thomas put together, years ago.
Not years.
It's
just a while.
Okay.
We will require that people who are on the float stay on the float, and those that are off the float stay off the float. No jumping on and off. Candy, again, will be handed out curbside without walking to the float. All of these recommendations have been, Michelle has been very thorough.
We gotta, how do we handle our popsicles now?
So this is what we're recommending, is on the popsicles, we would recommend that we invite you to get back on the fire truck with your families and lead the parade out. And then secondly, we would like to provide a booth or an area in the park where after the parade, you would be able to still pass out the popsicles, and we would provide a photo op opportunity where you can take pictures with the mayor or the council. And also you will be able to have a more substantial conversation with your residents. And we think that it will simplify the parade and also provide.
This isn't
Wow.
you're gonna have to deal with the mayor on this one.
And we
Can't see your
recognize,
face, she's turned away from you, but.
we recognize
I'm ready.
how popular the popsicles have been. And that's why we don't want to do without them. But we do want to shift to where we can provide those popsicles in a safer manner. That having that activity right off the front of the parade deteriorated the entire parade safety because kids were out in the road and they did not go back. So
Oh, I understand the purpose. I'm just like,
we think this is, well, we wrote it.
Everything's
Good option.
everything changes. I mean, some lady at Garvett was her name, she wanted to have the parade in the afternoon. And we did it. 2 years later, we said, the hell with that. We're going back to this. And so, you know, there's change involved in everything. And the biggest concern I always had was no matter how you want to give away something, you're asking, there's an encroachment.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what we did. We even had the military. Remember when they would walk down the curb and try to keep?
Yeah.
And it's still,
Was the little girl that got killed in Kaysville, was it a?
She was attempting to get on and off the boat. I don't know if it was on her, but she was attempting to.
So, just so you know, this begs the question, and I'm gonna float it out there now, is how committed are you for your day? Because now you have an hour and a half of the parade, and how many hours at the booth? Which cuts down on your personal family time, which I know in the past, after the parade, I mean, you guys will look at it, you know, you want to go be with your family. So,
And we would provide staff to assist with popsicle distribution in your name.
like that, wear my name tag?
If you'd like, Mr. Thomas, I'd be honored.
Yeah, well, I'm for. I've never ever liked, if I had my way in a parade, I wouldn't allow anything out of that. Just because it just scared the hell out of me. And you see it, I mean,
It is scary.
we're just lucky.
We love it,
You know,
it's so
yeah,
fun to see
sure.
it
It's
based on
fun,
kids, but.
And it's
it is-
neat, but, you know, if it only happens once, it screws it up forever.
yeah. Well, and it did,
You know.
which is the purpose of
Well,
this.
and-
I understand
yeah,
that.
it
and know
did.
that this is
And I
what we
just
gotta
remember
do.
when we were.
I'm not balking. I'm
Oh,
just
yeah.
like going,
And we heard,
well,
I mean, I think
time
we all heard
commitment
it at
now,
the same time.
more so.
Yeah,
It just-
it
it
went
was
pretty
just-
fast.
It was a horrible feeling, knowing it was next door, sister
Yeah.
city, and that it could have happened here, and
So what,
while ours was going at the same time. it was
okay,
just
but I don't want to get tripped up on this. Let's keep going, because do you need to go over some more safety stuff so that,
No?
so basically, any parade entry then will not hand out any,
They will not,
they won't be able to
go
distribute
back.
anything.
they will not be able to come to the float and back. If they have a wagon full of candy and they want to walk the entire route, they can do so.
So you can have a cooler, like a rolling cooler or something.
You'd have to have a pallet.
You have to, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, you just can't keep going back and forth. And are you requiring them, the parade or the entry, to supply the marshal on each side?
Yes, we are asking them to provide it. We're also having CERT step in and be the city representative at these entries. And so we will try to provide one CERT member or staff member or another
With
volunteer.
each entry?
Yeah, so that we have a city presence to make sure that the float
Right.
is
So that would be one of the four, or that would be four of their own plus one of ours.
If we can, we'd have 4 and 1 of ours.
Okay.
Dave, with the parade entry committee approval committee, the Parks and Rec people and the commission folks, what criteria are they looking at when you receive these applications?
The criteria was set out last year. We were basically looking for entries that are decorated and have a theme that coincides with the 4th of July. We are simply trying to move away from the truck and advertising.
Okay, I'm gonna bring up the problem we had last year when you had somebody that presented a really good application and on paper, they look great. They show up and they start out the parade and it looks great and then all of a sudden, bam, they're onto a whole different target. How can you deal with those? I mean, they're out there promoting a whole different item.
If my staff is not as focused on popsicles during the parade, we can spend more time, and I'm sorry to be blunt, but we can spend more time.
You can take away my popsicles.
We can spend more time monitoring during the parade.
Gary, are you worried about any constitutional issues with the parks? I mean, that just seems like someone coming in and saying, no, on an application, and you have to make a decision based on some objective criteria.
No, I appreciate that. I think there ought to be criteria, but the criteria that ought to be related to the 4th of July is a good one, because we do have Pioneer Parade down in Salt Lake, has to be Pioneer related. it can't be politically related, but and you've got themes. And as long as we stick to the theme and don't vary for anybody in particular, you know.
Well, that was the crazy part last year. They started out that way.
That was,
It needs to be
As they
enforced.
went along, they had people come in and really change the whole dynamics of what it was.
Well, the only other thing I saw was June 16th. That only gives you, if you're building a big float, that's tough.
And that's the deadline for getting the notification out. If we have someone that brings in a float, we are already.
You're already saying that's okay, or, oh, okay, because that would, you know. Yeah, so give them the time they need,
how old was your?
so.
Can we move ahead with the popsicles in the park?
I'll talk, yeah. I mean, I don't think we have a choice here. I mean, I get it, I understand. Am I disappointed? Extremely, because you lowered the bomb here and didn't talk to me beforehand. So that's what I'm upset with, Dave. I would think you would have enough respect for what we've done in the past, for this program and what we've done, that you would have said something going out.
I apologize. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we got 3 minutes. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn so you can take the restroom and then we'll go to the meeting.
Motion to adjourn?
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry, Dave, that's usually your,
We don't
your motion.
That's okay.
Welcome everyone out to our Layton City Council meeting this evening. It's June 1st, and it looks like we got a good audience out here, so I'm glad to see that. And as customary with our meetings, we always like to start with the pledge and the prayer. And so for that reason, we also switch it up each month so that one of us here in the dais will take turns. And tonight, it's my turn. So with that, I'd invite all of you to stand and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. That was very well, good and loud, which we haven't had that for a while. I appreciate it. Okay, I've actually made arrangements prior to for a prayer to be given by Miss Deneen Adams, who is with Open Doors, but is also of the Catholic faith. So, Miss Deneen, would you mind coming up and asking or giving us our prayer?
In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, O most holy heart of Jesus, fountain of every blessing, we adore you, we love you. With a holy heart, we ask you to look over our city council, help them to decide decisions for our communities so our communities can prosper and be safe. And that we ask you in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Thank you, Father, Son, the Holy Spirit.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay, this is unusual. We don't have any minutes to cover tonight, however, or verbal petitions. We do have some municipal announcements, though, so I'd like to turn the time over to our council members who serve on various committees to make those announcements.
Thank you. It's summer and lots going on in our city, lots of activities. Bring the family out. First of all, tomorrow evening, in conjunction with Davis Arts Council, will be the free movie in the park, starting at 7 p.m. until it finishes. Beautiful new bright screen that we can start before it gets dark, so very nice. I believe the movie is Captain Marvel tomorrow evening, so. So that'll be every Friday evening, starting at 7 p.m. Later on in July, we'll have Layton Fest starting on Friday evenings. But about a month away is our 4th of July Liberty Days, not just parade, but full day of activities, including 2 days prior, the Voices of Liberty concert. That'll be July 2nd. But you can find a full schedule of all the activities at laytoncity.org and any registrations for the 5K and different activities that are available that day. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to invite you all to view the Parents Empowered campaign over at the Surf and Swim. Parents Empowered is a campaign sponsored by the Layton Communities That Care, and it's a program that helps to focus on prevention of drug and alcohol use and suicide prevention in youth. And so we have some really nice murals over at the Surf and Swim, just reminding you of, different things to help your child stay safe and to know that there are people who care and love them, not just their family, but the rest of us as well. So just invite you to go over to Surf and Swim throughout this summer and take a look at the Parents Empowered information.
Is there, on that kickoff date, is there going to be any special promotion or anything?
I don't think they are.
Okay, all right. Okay. I know in addition to that, I think on June 10th is the Sounds of Freedom Car Show that will also take place out here. So that's another fun event that I know everyone enjoys attending. If there's no other announcements here, then what I'd like to do is go ahead and turn the time over to our citizens. This is your time to come up and address the council. You can come to either side of the podium. We need you to state your name and address and the purpose of what you're discussing. We do like to limit the comments to 3 minutes if possible. However, if you are here to speak about one of our public hearing items, then you can wait and speak specifically at that time. But if it's anything other than what's on our agenda, then we'd welcome you to come up and address us now at this time. And also, please keep in mind that this is not an opportunity for us to get into a dialogue. We will listen, we'll take all that information, and if we need to, we'll get back to you, but we won't really get into a dialogue, just so you know. Okay, thank you. The time is now yours.
Hi, my name is Eva Harris. I live at 1583 Boulder Creek Lane in Layton. I've lived in Layton since 1991. I have great memories of swimming at Surf and Swim as a kid. Riding the waves, floating in the tubes, pushing myself to the bottom of the deep end, and jumping off the diving board on hot summer days. I don't know why this is emotional for me. As an adult, I've enjoyed bringing my kids to swimming lessons, hosting birthday parties at Surf and Swim, summer swim days, and even training for a triathlon a few years back. Most importantly, Surf and Swim has been a safe haven for my daughter, who's a competitive swimmer with the Layton Surfers. It's a place where she has built confidence, perseverance, strength, lots of muscles, and many friendships. Sadly, the pool is 37 years old and just can't keep up with the needs and desires of the citizens anymore. I'm here tonight on behalf of a group of Layton citizens. Almost everyone here. That includes lap swimmers, water aerobic attendees, recreational users, parents of kids who need swim lessons, Layton Surfers swim team members, high school swim team members, and those who need a pool for medical rehab who are excited to help and get a new swimming pool in our community. We know how hard our city council members work to advocate for the residents of Layton. We appreciate the time and commitment that you give that makes Layton a great place to live. We also know that this will be an expensive, time-consuming, and difficult endeavor. We're here to partner with you and help. We believe the partnerships that will be needed are available in the community, and we are willing to go out and help do the work to secure them. We're asking for Layton City to put forward a plan that we can champion and support, a plan we can take out to the community and obtain those partnerships we need to provide this space to the citizens of Layton. We got an email this afternoon from the athletic director from Davis School District that I'd like to share with you, Tim Best. He said, I spoke with our school board last month about the pool situation in Davis County. I've often worked with Mr. Price on pool discussions and the future of their pool. They know the position from the district standpoint. We'll partner with them when the time arrives for a project. We've got a great relationship with them, and they know we'll help when it's time to talk new pools. You can mention that Tim Best is a huge fan of Layton City, and Davis School District greatly appreciates the support and our partnership through the years. I just want to thank you for your time, your hard work, and your dedication in providing the best community to live in. I've lived here essentially my whole life, and I don't know that I'll ever leave. So, thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else who wishes to make a comment? Okay. That being said, I want to acknowledge all of you who are here in attendance and the purpose of you being here. And I can tell you that we have been looking at several options. There is no plan yet. We hear your message. We're working on it. And this helps bring more awareness to it. So I just want you to know that we know what needs to be done. So, Councilman Bloxley?
Madam Mayor, do you mind? Gary, if we have public input and a citizen's comment, can we discuss that item amongst the council while we have them here, even if it's not on the agenda? As long as we don't make any final determinations, we just have a discussion. We really haven't had a chance to really deliberate on this issue as a body. We just received the last work meeting when the mayor wasn't here. we received the pool survey, and we've gone over that. But I was just curious if that is a trigger for us to be able to have these discussions, or if it's something that should be put on a future agenda.
You're able to discuss those things as a council at any time. Anything that comes up as a result of citizen comment, you can't make a decision on it, of course. And it's always wise probably to allow staff to help in whatever responses you might need. So if you've got questions that you want to take back to staff, have them answer, it would be good to put it on the agenda in the future as an item, but you're free to discuss whatever you wish to discuss tonight.
Okay.
So do you have something you want to bring up then?
I just, if I may, Madam Mayor, just the fact that we have all these people here, I think it's a good time to use some of the time that we have as a discussion, with your permission, to maybe get kind of where we think, and we're not making any decisions here, but I think we've all had a chance to read the pool survey, and we can at least discuss with them here. That's why they came. I think it would be good if you're permissible for that.
We've got a short agenda here, so I don't mind it if you guys want to take the time and feel the need for it at this point. I agree. I mean, we represent the citizens, and I mean, they need to kind of understand at least where some of our thoughts are at this point, even though, like I said, we don't have all the information that we've asked. I know that the Parks and Rec Department is still working on some alternatives and some specs for us. So with that in mind, I'm willing to entertain it if you so want to.
Okay. Well, and just for my own thoughts on the pool, and I appreciate all you guys coming out to visit with us today. Like Councilman Roberts said, it was nice hearing the pledge so loud. It's usually just us up here, so it's great to hear that from you guys. Thanks for bringing the kids out. We want to make Layton the best place for them as they grow up. And so the pool is something we've discussed. Councilman Morris and Councilman Thomas and I have been on the council for almost 4 years now, and Madam Mayor's been on the council a long time before that. But we discuss the pool all the time. It's something that we discuss. We know it's what it does well. We know where it struggles. We've had our city staff go out and provide a pool survey about options, feasibility options, and that's why you've probably heard about the small pool and the situation with that. That came about from a feasibility study that we commissioned that our great people in the Parks and Rec provided us to give us ability to know what we can do with that wonderful thing we have back. It's been built. It was built the year I was born, so it's been there for some time. And so we want to make sure that the next generation has access to those types of things. But as as Eva mentioned in her comments, it's a very costly, very time-consuming approach, and we want to have partners, and we need partners. So for my 2 cents on the swimming pool issue is that just know that we hear you. We get the emails. We know what you say, and trust me, we want to find a solution that's the best for the citizens. Not just the citizens that are in this room, however, the citizens who maybe never use the pool, because the options that we probably have are going to involve them potentially financially contributing through bonds or taxes. So those are issues that we have to think about beyond this room. But that's what we've been elected to do. And I know the city staff, our Parks and Rec, do such a great job in giving us all the information. So just from my standpoint, I just want to say thank you for coming out and caring about the city and trying to make the city the best place, because we share that resolution here. And we're going to try to find the best solution. And it may not be an overnight solution, but we asked that feasibility study to put forward because we know that the pool's lifespan is running out. And so we're trying to find a way to be able to plan for the future. So I appreciate Madam Mayor giving me the chance to speak for that. And with that, I'll open up if any other council members would like to speak on it.
Then go ahead.
I do just have one statement. I know we've heard from Ms. Weaver a number of times, and so I did respond to her earlier this week. I wanted to make sure that everyone who watched the work meeting last week or saw the minutes was aware that the small pool was closing because of safety reasons, not because any of us want it. My kids swim there too. And so I just wanted to make sure that that was very clear, that we didn't close it because we necessarily wanted to, but we closed it because we need to. And we want to make sure that everybody who is using any of the pool facilities, any of the facilities that we have in the city, that they're safe, because that's of utmost importance. So I echo Councilmember Bloxham's sentiments that we love the city and we love what services we can provide. And so that's something that we are thinking of. I believe probably my first, I don't know, second or third month in, I asked about the pool because I wasn't on the council when that first study was provided. And so the Parks and Rec team graciously put together another one. And as Councilmember Bloxham said, we're still reviewing it. We're still listening. We're still asking questions. They're still bringing things back to us. So again, know we hear you. Know that we live here too, and our kids want to use the pool and all of the other services that we can provide. So we are thinking and trying to figure out what's the best plan and what's the best options. Again, we do need help. So thank you for coming. I told Rachel I haven't responded to everybody yet, but I appreciate anybody who offers opportunities for our citizens to actually come and talk to us and has, engaging in the process. That really is exciting to me. So I'm glad that we have all of the emails. I'm glad that you all are here and that there's something that you're super concerned about, because that just helps us know, what does the community want, and helps us to look at ways that we can help, make our community better for those of you here and those who are not. So thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
I always do the end. Just seeing you here is, I don't want to say exciting, that's not the right word, but to see people that believe in something. And this lady, I didn't get your first name, Harris?
Eva.
Eva? Mm-hmm. Okay, I have Steva. I also have hearing aids, so I apologize. But the comment you made, which makes me feel good, is what can we do to help? And that's, if everybody takes that approach, what can we do to help? Then I think we can find ways to do things that maybe we couldn't before. But I do guarantee you one thing, from not only from the council and the mayor and from the city, we know what we're up against. And so we're trying to find ways to alleviate it, to help it. If any of you win the lottery, give us a call, but, it can be done. And I believe in time it will be done. And it's just making everything work. And we're going to need a lot of people to make that work. And I applaud you for standing up for something that you have belief in, because we have the same feelings, except we have to jump through a few more hoops, and we're trying to. And so I do appreciate you coming out, except for Craig. Tired of seeing him around here. I heard you retired. Did you retire? Bjorkman?
Kind of.
Yeah, should have known. Kind of like me, kind of. Okay. But thank you. Appreciate that, Eva.
Okay. Councilman Morse, did you have something?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also appreciate the involvement of the citizens. We were sent emails. We received them, as Councilman Bloxham mentioned. Dave just mentioned hoops that have to be jumped through. Here in a couple of weeks, we're looking at approving a budget of $129 million, I believe. It's a big budget. Each of us as families have a budget. And imagine taking that budget and saying, all right, we want to purchase something that's could be over a third of our budget. That's a big deal. That's bigger than this room. That falls on the back of 21,000 households in Layton City. I'm not saying it can't be done. It's one of the things that this group has to look at, and we'll look at it. Years ago, maybe 7-8 years ago, I've heard mention the school district, And I don't know all the details of what the school district's offering, and when they say help, what does that even mean? I don't know specifically. But again, a few years back, there was a plan of, or at least an idea of something out in Ellison Park. And maybe I'm talking out of turn, I don't know. But the school district builds the pool, Layton City gives the land, Layton City operates the pool, but Davis School District builds the pool. That didn't happen. COVID happened and change in administration at the school district. Those sorts of discussions, I don't think they're happening anymore. It's more of a, well, we can help here or we can help there if different cities want to do different things. That just dilutes it. That dilutes funding. And we're back to this large chunk of money, something that we have to deliberate and talk about. Layton City, we just don't do that a lot. I think we have we've got a Utopia bond that we're paying on, and we've got almost done paying on a bond for Ellison Park for some land there. That's it. We just don't put things on credit cards here, and we like to save up and pay for it as we go. We think that's a good practice. So we'll be deliberate. We'll be probably slow because this is a big deal. We want our community to continue to grow and have opportunities, as Bettina said, for recreation, for everybody. And swimming, it's important that little kids learn how to swim. We like to talk in our family, it's swim, pray, and read. Those are 3 things that you need to know. And community pool helps with that. One of my, and I've mentioned this to a couple of you in emails, but I'll just say it and then I'll be done, Mayor.
You're fine.
Is surf and swim wasn't meant for swim meets. Just wasn't. And to have something, you think, well, it should be because you're all here and we love swimming. You do. It just wasn't meant for that. And so the accommodation over the years has been the service of Layton City for not just Layton residents, but others as well from different communities. It just wasn't built for that. And so when I look at the school district and, we don't build football fields, we don't build baseball diamonds for the schools. They do that themselves. So those are things that we need to talk about. The district's large, Davis County's large. There are other cities south of the county. They've got a district where everybody south of Farmington pays a tax every year for that, the Bountiful Bubble or whatever they call that South Davis Rec Center.
Yeah.
Whether you use it or not. We don't have that here. So just so you know that we have having these, at least these thoughts, these discussions, we understand the issue. We want to help provide some sort of recreation for all of us in the city. And I pledge that I'll look at each idea and each item and decide on the merits of that with the understanding that this is expensive and it's generational. If it's something that we end up doing or not doing, it's a generational thing, as Councilman Bloxham mentioned, and we feel that weight. So if you go home with nothing else tonight, just understand that at least for me, I feel the weight of what we should and what we could do here. So again, thank you for coming. Thank you for giving up an evening to listen to Dave. Just thank you for being involved. Thanks, Mayor.
You're welcome. Okay, I believe Councilman Roberts would like to make a comment as well.
Yeah, I could echo what's been told. That's what's been said, but not just from this side, but from you guys as well in your emails. We've had conversations offline. Me and Council Member Bettina Smith Edmondson have only been here a little over a year, and it's been a big topic of conversation. I appreciate your attendance. I appreciate the emails. There's obviously passion. There's a I can see the value of the community and the swim family, if you will, the benefit to youth as well as adults. As I've learned, different communities have different value, and there's a great one with what you guys are trying to do. And as I said, in my just over a year and a half on the council, it's been a big topic of conversation, and I see the desire, with staff as well as with elected officials to provide opportunities for the future, for the youth. And, I appreciate you being here. It puts more emphasis on that and keeps it on the forefront. And I do promise you we're working on this, and it takes time, it takes money, but I've said the word appreciate a lot, but the fact that you guys are willing to come out, but also to do some of the legwork to build the community, it means a lot. So thank you.
Okay. Council, I appreciate you all voicing your opinion on this, and I hope you do understand that collectively we all do appreciate your input here. And these decisions are hard decisions, but at the same time, we want to make sure we make the right decision. So to be pushed into making a decision could be making the wrong decision. And I think you've heard here that this council is very conscious of making sure they make that right decision, and they're going to vet it out and make sure we look at all of the options, not just one or two, or just who can we maybe partner with or not. We will vet it all out and make sure we make the right decision. So again, thank you for being here. But before anybody of you leave, and you don't need to stay for our whole meeting, I would like to acknowledge a row back here of Scouts. Would you guys mind standing up and saying what troop you're from? I love it. In fact, I love it so well. If you kids willing to come back at our next council meeting, we'd love to have you present the colors. How about that? Can you give me the date on that? 2 weeks. Yeah, it would be the June 15th at 7 p.m. I mean, if you don't mind, maybe pass your number on to the troop leader there, if you wouldn't mind giving me your number, and we can coordinate and see if that would work out or not. But I just think it's great to see the Scout program, especially at this young age, and I just wanted to acknowledge them. So again, we appreciate you guys being here and voicing your opinions. Okay, I think, sir, did you have a comment? Okay, I'll go ahead and entertain your comment then.
Sorry, this kind of came to me while we were talking. So my name's Dan Harris. I'm Eva's husband. I'm also a sergeant major in the Army National Guard. And we have an engineer battalion here in the state of Utah. And they have programs called IRTs that cities and communities can apply for, which is where our engineers come in and do their annual training, their 2 weeks, do some on-the-job training to build. We built a lot of the baseball diamonds, things down in Utah County. And we're currently working with the Navajo Nation to go fix some of their roads. And it's, this may not be something that they would approve, but it's an option possibly to apply for it to see if we could bring in some of those vertical and horizontal construction units to come in and help with this project. Okay. Can't get it if we don't ask, so just thought I'd put that out there.
Well, thank you for your service.
Yep.
We really appreciate that, and for the ideas. Okay, anyone else? If not, then I'll go ahead and move on to our public hearing portion of our meeting. Okay. Thank you again for being here. We'll give him a minute. Okay, I think we can go ahead and move on now to our public hearing portion of our meeting. We've got 3 items that are under our public hearing, and we'll go ahead and start out with item number A, which is an adoption of our community block grant consolidation plan, and this information will be presented by Mr. Morgan Cloward.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for this opportunity to have our follow-up public hearing on the city's Community Development Block Grant program. In February, I presented the fact that we were working on the 5-year CDBG consolidated plan and also the current annual action plan. And between that time, actually the plan, the nexus was fall of last year was when we started researching and putting the plan together. We've received input from the public and our community partners, and the slide that you see before you is what we've crafted from input from these groups and also our Community Development Block Grant Committee. You may notice there are 2 items on there, 2 activities that are a little bit different than we have indicated in the past. The first one is special economic development activities, and this has replaced our historic downtown project where we were doing some rehab work in downtown historic part of Layton City. And this activity that we've included in the plan is exciting. We would like to use some funds to be determined that would help create an incubator space or a maker space in Layton City to help low to moderate income businesses and people who are going to school, to technical school specifically, Davis Tech, and also use some of these funds to help with commercial and industrial improvements and assistance with equipment for qualified small businesses. So that's one project that's a little bit different than in years past. And we also have a new partner since the last time we met. We've replaced the Davis Community Housing Authority, which has decided to discontinue their partnership with Layton City with Habitat for Humanity. And I'm excited to report that they have agreed to pick up the slack and continue with our emergency home repair rehab program. And also they're going to add to the mix where we've done an affordable home with Habitat or with Have a Heart Davis School District. We've added Habitat for Humanity in the mix as well if the others are not able to help at a certain time. And then we have our past public service partners that are listed there. And so tonight the hope is after we have a chance to look at this and get public input is to have the council adopt Resolution 2322, adopting the CDBG Consolidated Plan for 2023 through 2027, and also within that, the Annual Action Plan for 2023 and 2024. So with that said, are there any questions?
Council, do you have any questions on this? Do you want to speak to the fact that we did not receive as much funding as what we have in the past?
Yes. So depending on how well our community is doing with our economic, basically employment, and how well we're thriving as a community, that funding really depends on that. And so we're about 30,000 less than the previous program year, just because things are going pretty well in our state and in our community. So HUD has decided that we don't need quite as much financial assistance as we've required in the past. So we've had to make some cuts in funding in some of the areas.
I just have a question, Morgan. So on the special economic development activities, how it's to be determined, we see it here on the 23-24 year, but the figures already add up to the total that's listed there. So are you anticipating that we're going to get some more money, or is this just to have it on there so that as we move forward, we'll know that this is a part of
right now it's a placeholder. I wanted to put it in our 5-year consolidated plan because we plan to put some money in there in the near future. I just wanted to give you a heads up of what we have replaced our historic downtown project with.
Thank you. I appreciate this. I would just submit that I am always in favor of increasing the amount of home buyer assistance we offer. I know currently we offer $10,000, so with this $50,000, that would be up to 5 families. So the more families that we can actually help in, becoming a homeowner, I would love to see that increase.
Yeah, definitely. And we do have funds from this current program year and the year prior that we can still utilize for that. Unfortunately, we haven't had as many applications in that program as we have in years past because of high interest rates and housing costs. But I have seen that pick up. There has actually been more interest in that of late. So I'm happy to report that we are working on more applications than we have in the past.
So along those same lines, just to be clear, somebody could apply for our funding plus the additional state funding that the legislature has had as well. Okay.
Yeah. To my understanding, that's an option. Yes.
Okay. Any other questions?
Morgan, I just want to say thanks for all the work you do on this. I see in our packet how much work you have to put into this, and so thank you for the time you spend doing that. This is just a policy thing. I just wish that HUD would give us more than the 15% cap on these public service subgrants, because I just really think that's money that just goes directly to people who actually need it in our city, whereas some of these we don't have people even apply for the money that's available. So it doesn't seem like a very efficient program, which is, I guess, something you could say about, I don't need to say it, but
yeah.
Thank you for your work and for getting this money and going through the processes so that, because you have to do all the work to be able to get the money to the people who can actually help, to then have them be able to have the funds available to help the actual people. So thank you. It's a really good work that you do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'd echo that as well.
Ma'am.
Okay. Sure.
Morgan, Lantern House, I know we've had open doors here each time, Safe Harbor giving reports. I don't remember listening to Lantern House come for a report or even coming to request. I know they've applied, but what are they doing?
So yeah, they're our partner that's in downtown Ogden City, and they help us with our homeless clientele from Layton City. So we have it in the plan for Lantern House to assist at least 10 Layton City clientele, and they basically help with their soup kitchen, with shelter, and they also have several programs where they help people who need help with job skills and with medical care and drug addiction, and those types of programs they can tap into. I know we haven't had anyone from that group publicly comment in the last couple of years, but I did extend that invitation for them to do that, but they didn't show up tonight, unfortunately.
Thank you.
So we have an option here to adjust the numbers then?
We could, yeah, we could shift that around. I just went with our public service partners, and I just did a percentage that applied evenly to everyone in that category.
I think, and Councilman Morris and Madam Mayor, and I know I've made this point previously, that this isn't an entitlement.
Right.
You know, that we know these two ladies are here because they're here all the time, telling us what they're doing with the funds. So, I don't want to throw the apple cart out, but it's an interesting discussion for us to potentially have because, we definitely want to help those people in those homeless situations. But, if you're not accounting, as you mentioned, Councilman Morris, to what you're actually doing with the funds, then it does seem like an entitlement at that point.
Well, and just to address that, I do get reports from our partners, including Lantern House, and I know the money is well spent. It's needed. I'd love to offer more if we could. So I'd be happy to share any of those reports with you, and I get specifics on our residents here who get that assistance. But yeah, like you said, it would be good to have a personal acknowledgement or report from our partners from now and then.
Do they do more with housing?
Lantern House?
Lantern House, like putting people up? I've been there, but it seems like it was a big soup kitchen and but it seemed like it was a pretty big building.
It is. It's a pretty substantial facility.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I don't know if they have any type of other housing projects going on.
Okay, so I mean, as far
Not that
as
I'm aware.
what you would use Lantern House would not be like to put people up for whatever.
We have open doors. They're our partner that administers the motel voucher program.
Yeah. Okay.
So we tap into their expertise with that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other discussion here? If not, I'd like to open this up for a public comment. Council, I need a motion to open this public hearing.
Make a motion, we open the public hearing. Is it for all three items or?
Yes.
Yeah. Motion to open the public hearing.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved in second. Okay, we'll now entertain public comment.
Hi. Open Doors, Deneen Adams. I can actually answer the questions that you guys were just asking. Lantern House is invaluable to Open Doors. I know it's tough. You guys sit in a tough position. You don't get that much money where you all come here. Everybody, all of our organizations do great work, but we find somebody, we do street outreach, say 12 o'clock at night, and we can't send them to a hotel. We call Lantern House, and they'll take them. Lantern House never turns anyone down. They're always full, but they'll never turn anyone down. So we really, really need that service without us having a shelter. They don't provide services as far as they provide what we call crisis services. So it's for someone in crisis. So say we send somebody there for the night to shelter. One of our case managers goes to the shelter the next day and says, okay, how can we get you in a house? What do we need to do? We have a rapid rehousing program. They have to be homeless. That's one of the requirements. We then help them. Believe it or not, when you're homeless, you don't have ID, you have to get credit scores, you have to get all this information together, so then we can take it to a landlord. Now, raise your hand, how many people really believe that these landlords want to rent to someone who's homeless, that they've come into a program? The longest we can help them for is about, by HUD definition, we can help them for 24 months, but based on our funding at Open Doors, we like to cut it at 6 months. So it's definitely, to get to your question, it's a great crisis program, and we need it because we don't have one here. So again, Open Doors, thanks Layton City for giving us our funding. What we're really asking for this year is, especially in regards to homelessness and housing, and things are getting tough in this city, and we're seeing less and less funding. We don't have the state funding, the federal funding that came through. We're asking our agency for your support as local elected officials, to have our backs, to stand behind us, to every chance you get, to every person you talk to support all of our organizations. Safe Harbor does an incredible job with domestic violence. We're doing so much with so little. Davis County, for some reason, gets ignored by the state when it comes to funding. And it makes me so angry because I sit there and see all these other cities that are receiving $20, $40 million for these projects that I know we need, and I think we can do a better job. But for some reason, we can't show that we work as a huge collaborative. We need better collaboration, and I think that's where we need to turn to our elected officials. So that's what I'm asking for your support in. But thank you for everything you do so far. And Mayor Petro, you have been wonderful. And Morgan, you're great too, wherever you are. So thank you. Is there any questions I can answer? Very passionate about helping the homeless, and housing is a big thing, and the home buyer assistance program, I just spoke about it tonight at our Circles program. One family, they have 6 kids. They said their biggest dream was to own a home, but they were $20 a month short in their budget just to meet all their bills. So how could they save? And I told them about the home buyer assistance program, what the state offers, and also Wells Fargo has a really good program that they use for first-time home buyers. So if we all work together, we can help these families. Thank
You
you.
do a great job, thank you. I believe Councilman Morris has a question for you, though.
Yeah, just a question. You mentioned state funding. This money isn't coming from Layton citizens. This is coming from the federal government.
Yeah,
It's because of how many people we have here, yes, but it's not coming from our property tax. So, state funding. How come? Why aren't you getting
That's a
funding
good question. Just so you guys know, I do a lot of consulting work on affordable housing. I work with a company called EcoBox Fabricators in Salt Lake. My job with them is to help their clients build affordable housing. Worked with a client who just got $12 million to do a permanent supportive housing project. It was a lot at the state. I know you all heard of Wayne Niedehauser. He went and advocated for the state, and they received this funding. And they got $12 million to build a permanent supportive housing, and he was a private developer. And but they worked with Pamela Atkinson, they worked with the Housing Authority very closely, they worked with the Community Action Program very closely, so they all came together to build this permanent supportive housing, and it was one-time funding allocated by the legislature. I forget what this appropriation it was under, but there was about $120 million that was allocated for affordable, they called it affordable housing, and permanent supportive housing falls under that.
That's good.
So,
Wish we could do more.
yeah.
Wish the state could do more with all the money.
Yeah, and it's again, everything kind of gets dispersed and fragmented, and I don't want to see that happen in Davis County. I want to see us all come together to solve these problems.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to speak on item A? Our community block grant recipient? I don't,
Can I come?
it's a public hearing.
Okay. 1 minute.
Okay, 1 minute.
This is the kind of work I've been getting in myself ever since retiring from Layton City and Layton City Police Department and the Military Air Force and everything else. And I'm an activist at getting things done. All of you know about me. And so I would like to get as a helper assistant there, because I was also president of the Layton JCs here. And you know, when Weininger was down that store, I'd go get $30,000 from him for Easter eggs for every boy and girl in Layton City. Now, I know how to go out. I know all the bankers here. I know all the restaurants here. And I think I'm the Tom Tudor that's lived in my house for 57 years. And all my daughters, Rita, Lara, and Mindy, would be proud of me to get involved in, instead of staying at home and watching television and all the shows. That's just me. I'm different. I do something for every one of you. I used to save people's lives. In Layton City, there was a lady with a blue body, a baby. And I jumped out of my police car, ran over there on Gordon Avenue, and got a lady, gave her CPR. That's the kind of guy I am. If I see danger out there, even the girl that was died over across from the fire station, I know so many things that you wouldn't even want me around, because I've got Layton City. And I was here with the swimming pool, the original first one, the little square one. I swam in that pool down there.
Okay, thank you, Tommy.
And swam in the big one. And then now I'll be quiet, but me and my kids all favor the experts here getting something done for a new swimming pool. And you got one of the greatest guys there.
Hey, Tommy, this is
I'm gonna quit
regarding
now.
item number A only, though.
Pardon?
So the comment should be on the community block grant recipients.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Community block. But if somebody wants to call me up and get me involved, I retired from 3 different of my jobs and got a paycheck every month 3 times.
Thank you. Okay, is there any other public comments on item number A? then council, I'll bring it back to you. We don't need to close the public hearing, but if we want to take action on resolution 2322, we could.
Madam Mayor, I move that we adopt Resolution 2322, the Community Development Block Grant Consolidated Plan for 2023 to 2027, and the Annual Action Plan for 2023 to 2024.
Okay, it's been moved in second that we adopt the plan as presented. We'll do a roll call vote on this. Councilmember Thomas?
Aye.
Is that an aye? Okay, I wasn't quite sure the way you said that. Okay. R. R. Okay. Okay, Councilmember Smith Edmondson?
Aye.
Councilmember Morris?
Aye.
Councilmember Bloxham?
Yes.
And Councilmember Roberts?
Yes.
Okay, there you have it. It's unanimous. Okay, we'll move on to item number B, which is a proposed amendment to the Layton City's Municipal Code, Title 19, and this item is going to be presented by Mr. Chad Wilkinson, who is our Economic Director.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. The next discussion item is to talk about a potential change to our ordinance related to single-family dwellings and water-wise standards. Your agenda includes a number of code sections with their title names, so it's a little bit longer than that on the agenda, but that's really the gist of this. In our work meeting, we spent quite a bit of time talking about some of the nuance of this particular amendment. I'm going to spend a little less time, but still try to give some detail to those members of the public that are listening in. Just to recap our water-wise efforts to this point, back in 2021, the city adopted a standard to change our ordinance completely, the way we handled our landscaping within the city. The previous ordinance had minimums for the amounts of turf and grass that were required. We changed that to maximums. So very, very, very different approach on the way we handle turf grass and those high water using landscape items. In addition, just within the last few months, the council has adopted standards that require incremental compliance for commercial and institutional uses and other multifamily and other uses that come in for remodels and various different changes or additions to their buildings that would allow for the city to get incremental compliance with those landscape standards. And again, this is an attempt to incrementally make some difference in the water use that we have within our city. And so far, that's been very, very successful as we've implemented that in the last few months. So the item that we want to talk about tonight is, again, we have a program that's been initiated, a lot of news media coverage for this item related to turf rebate replacement rebate programs. Some of the requirements of that program that's administered by the Weber Basin Water Conservation District are related to single-family residential. So one of those requirements is that cities, in order to have that funding available to them, need to adopt a standard that restricts any kind of turf grass within the front and side yard areas for new single-family residential development to 35%. That also restricts any kind of turf within areas, park strips, and other areas that are less than 8 feet wide. As we've looked at that as a city, again, before I get into that, these are just some very quick bullets about that program. It does require that people apply through the UtahWaterSavers.com. They have to submit a site plan that shows that they will continue to have some type of plant materials on the lot. They have no more than 35% grass. They would have inspections. They'd have to submit photographs of each step, work closely with the water district to receive that rebate. This is just a side-by-side comparison of what we've already adopted. As the city looked at this back in 2021, this was something that we considered. Should we adopt restrictions to these single-family standard single-family lots? At the time, the decision that was made by the council was that we would not adopt those. Instead, we focused on those areas that we thought would have the biggest impact. So all of our planned residential unit development subdivisions, which include single-family and townhomes, and in some cases, some multifamily, were required to meet those standards, those very strict standards. In fact, our standards for those types of development are even stricter than those standards that are being requested by the district for participation in that program. In addition to that, all of our townhome, multifamily, mixed-use, commercial, any of those industrial or institutional uses have those same very strict standards that apply based on that 2021 amendment that's already in place, that's been implemented for the last 2 years as we've gone forward. So again, at the time, the council 2 years ago decided that they did not want to have that same requirement for standalone, single-family residential in a standard subdivision. If you were to change it, the change is fairly simple. The change would be to adopt a standard for single-family residential, standard single-family residential, that limits the amount of turf in the front and side areas to 35%, that restricts that turf grass to areas that are less than 8 feet wide, and has some other things related to that, related to sprinklers and things that would facilitate that. The Planning Commission looked at these standards and actually did recommend approval of these standards, but it was a split vote. And I want to talk just a little bit about some of the concerns that were raised with the Planning Commission, and really some of the concerns that were raised in 2021 related to this standard. Members of the Planning Commission did feel that single-family residential homes, standard single-family residential homes, should have some flexibility. The difference between a standard single-family residential home and a PRUD development or a commercial development or a multifamily development is really who's going to be the one responsible for installing that landscaping. In any of those multifamily or commercial or PRUD developments, there's a master developer that has a development agreement that requires installation of landscaping, that requires compliance with the water-wise standards, and that really is there to make sure that there's the right design, the right implementation of those standards to make sure that we still have that water conservation. In contrast, with a single-family standard lot in a standard subdivision, landscaping is the responsibility of the homeowner. The builders are able to build the home and then give the homeowner the option of what they would like that landscaping to look like in their yard. We even allow them more time. We allow them to have up to a year to complete that landscaping so that they can get into their home, get settled, and decide what it is they want to do there in terms of landscaping. When this ordinance was adopted in 2021, the council felt strongly that those single-family residential homes should have that flexibility, that there should not be a restriction on those choices that people can make related to landscaping. We shared some data that I have available. I'm not going to necessarily share it unless the council would like, but it's clear to us that the trend towards PRUDs and these planned residential unit developments over the last few years, it's trended to be more of those than our standard single-family homes. So we in the last couple of years, for example, 2022, 2023, about 10% of the lots that we were looking at were standard single-family homes. The others, some were single-family, but they were within PRUD developments, planned residential unit developments, where these standards would already apply. So we really felt that the standards that we adopted in 2021 had the biggest impact on actual water conservation. And that's what we're looking for, is what can we do to have the biggest impact on water conservation. I also want to say that Layton really has, just as we did in 2021, pioneered this idea of incremental compliance for our commercial users. Some of our commercial and institutional users are some of our biggest water users, and it's not functional turf. It's turf that's there just for, just for the idea of beautification. So we're really trying to get those highest impact uses accounted for within our water-wise standard. With that being said, as we've reviewed this, again, if this council should determine that this is a good policy decision, that having this 35% restriction on new residential, staff is supportive of whatever decision the council would make there, but we do have reservations, and I wanted to make sure that the council was aware of those reservations and that the public also that's listening in were aware that this was a very deliberate decision by a previous council not to include these standards. So with that, the Planning Commission did recommend that the council adopt these standards that are within your packet, and that some of them are there on the screen. I'd be happy to answer any questions if I can.
Any questions? I know some of you may want to make some comments regarding this, which, we can have that discussion, but this is a public hearing, so should we see if anybody would, from the public, wish to comment on this item? Okay, just make sure you state your name and address for the record.
Rachel Sorensen. I live at 375 Owen Street. I think, from what I'm hearing, I wasn't here a few years ago when you guys made the change in 2021, but it sounds like you didn't include the single family because it wasn't as big of an impact. But if you adopt it now, it also allows those that already live here to apply for the rebate. So it may not be a huge impact on new families, but those here can apply for it. And it also only applies to the front and side yard, where most people don't use the grass in the front yard because they don't want their kids playing by the street. So they still have that flexibility. And 35% sounds like a low number of grass, but when you actually look at plans, it's a fair amount of grass. So I've already drawn up plans for my house. I drew it up over a year ago, before the rebate from the state or anything was there. And the only thing that's stopping me right now is cost. But when I looked at it, the grass amount was enough for my kids to play in the front yard, and we still had a nice design.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to comment? If not, I'll bring it back to the council for any type of discussion or action.
May I, Madam Mayor?
Sure.
Chad, just a question about, we talked in the work meeting, a work session about enforcement. If this, we give new homeowners or new home construction, you mentioned a year to put in the front yards and the side yards. How is that enforced? Is that, do we wait a year and say, okay, there's a tickler somewhere that someone calls and says, hey, have you done it yet? Or what's that process like?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good question. Typically, there's no enforcement needed. Most people want and have a desire to get their landscaping in very quickly when they get into a home. We don't see a lot that don't do that within that time frame. There are occasionally situations where someone may not be able to meet that, but has plans to meet that, and we do try to work with them if we know that that's something that's pending. It may be that year expires in the middle of the winter, for example, and they just say, hey, we meant to do this, but it just hasn't happened. So we try to work with people to the extent that we can if we know that there's a plan to do that. But I would say the vast majority of the time, people are anxious to get their landscaping in. That year is plenty of time for them to do that. They install that landscaping. And it's very, very rare that we would have a situation where that didn't happen. We have had some cases where neighbors have contacted us and said, hey, this has taken a long time for this particular person to get this landscaping in. What's the time frame? And in those cases, we've worked with those property owners to get compliance as quickly as we can in those cases. But it's very rare, very rare. Maybe once every few years we have a situation like that.
Any other questions?
Question, a comment. First of all, on the 35-50%, and I don't know we had this conversation in the work meeting, but now I'm trying to visualize that, and I know you showed some examples, but 35%, thanks. 35% if it was all grass. I believe in the packet it mentioned at maturity when you're talking about other plants as well. So it could be zero grass and all trees. Are we talking like the canopy of the tree, or?
No, it's the canopy does not count toward that. It would be the actual square footage, and that was clarified as we did those definitions, but it's the square footage of the lot. It would have to be covered minimum of 35%, and then that's, of course, the maximum amount that program would allow in turf, but as proposed by the Planning Commission, it would be a minimum of, it's a minimum requirement by the rebate program, but a maximum requirement by our code would be the 35% coverage there.
And as I mentioned in the work meeting, I have concerns about the science behind that, the benefits, the pros, the cons. I think there's benefit to having more, there could be benefit to having more if it's water-wise landscape and plants and trees and shrubs. And
yeah.
So I'm kind of hung up on the maxing that out at 35%, because we could save water by having more coverage and have other benefits as well.
Sure.
Okay.
So I brought this up in the work meeting. I'll bring it up again here. I wasn't on the council when the initial landscaping ordinance went into effect. And I know that just as Ms. Weaver Sorensen, excuse me, as Ms. Sorensen mentioned, she had her plans far in advance of this rebate being offered, just as the council had plans for water-wise landscaping prior to the Flip Your Strip rebate was offered. Not my biggest concern, but one of my concerns is making a change to an ordinance or a policy or whatever it happens to be for the sake of meeting a rebate. Because if the Weber Basin decides that they want to do a different rebate 2 years from now, then do we go back and make a change to our ordinance again so that that can be applied? The purpose really is to encourage residents to, be wise about conservation, which our community has proven, above and beyond with the drought conditions over the past 2 years, that we care. And I can hear that in your comments and also the comments that we've been getting emails about, that residents are just trying to help. They want to conserve, but they also want to do this in a cost-effective way. And so while it may seem like, we're not jumping at the bit to do this, it's definitely not because we don't agree with what you're doing or what you want to do or the passion that you have, because we share that. But this would be a policy that we would have to put in place that would then restrict other people. I know you didn't, Chad, show the graphic, the percentages of what the types of homes are that we are actually building in Layton, but I feel like it's helpful. There are a number of cities that don't have the space that we have to build, and so some of those cities that maybe are listed on the website, they're doing it. I don't know what their reasons are, but they may not have the capacity to build single-family homes like we do. And so just looking at our trend, we've got 10% currently new standard single-family residents, 5% in the future. It just seems like making a change to an ordinance so permanent that would restrict the ability for families to decide how they want to do what they can do is something that I'm a little unsure about, when I feel like we've done a lot to begin with, and that maybe we can push back on Weber Basin and say, hey, we are leaders in water conservation. What can you do for our residents? Because our city is already far above what many of these other cities are doing. We didn't need the incentive to do this, I guess is what I'm saying. So to punish residents because the city is not interested in maybe moving forward with a more restrictive ordinance, I feel like there's more discussions to be had, before moving in this direction.
Thank you. A lot of us have referred to this exhibit. Just for the sake of time, I didn't put it up there, but that's what we talked about in our work meeting, is that the trend has been toward development that already is required to meet those water-wise standards in our current code. That would be single-family PRUDs, townhomes, and apartments. We have fewer single-family residential. That number could change. That could go up and down. The biggest issue, I think, as expressed by the council in the past, was that we are impacting those people that do choose to live in a standard single-family home without living in one of these other types of developments, in order for us to qualify for, as you said, a current rebate program. And so the concern before was, and this was before the rebate was even mentioned or announced, but the concern before was that those single-family homeowners should still be allowed the flexibility. That doesn't mean they can't install water-wise landscaping if they wish. We've taken away any restrictions on that, but it does mean that there would still be flexibility if we leave that ordinance the way it is.
Yeah, again. Chad, back in 2021, so early on, we received information, emails from the public, even before the press conference with Governor Cox announcing it in May, and that we weren't on the list. And my thought at the time was, well, we'd been kind of a pioneer in the landscaping before anybody else, in Davis County at least, and the Flip Your Strip program was a tweak that we were able to do because it was just a tweak. as Council Member Smith Edmondson mentioned, that was, and so we didn't have the requirements from Weber Basin yet. I mean, it was announced that, hey, there's this money available, but we still didn't have the requirements that they're the ones who come up with, hey, we want to do this, and okay, cities need to adopt it. We didn't have that yet. And so maybe we were a little premature, at least I was probably premature, in saying, yeah, well it's an ordinance change, and thinking, well, it'll be a tweak. This isn't a tweak.
Yeah, there are impacts on future residences.
And so our family participated in the Flip Your Strip. I'm not sure when we're gonna make any money on the savings pay for what we did, because it's expensive. Even the park strip project is a lot of money. And you mentioned your plans. This is not a small amount of money on this turf replacement program, and it's an investment that a family needs to make or has to make, and it's thousands of dollars, not just a park strip, which was a lot as well.
Yeah.
I just, the consternation is that why are we stopping families from doing what they want to do? And because not everyone's going to do it, because it's expensive, it's an investment. Why not have Weber Basin work with the families directly and figure out a different way to do this, instead of, as you mentioned, a ordinance change and a policy decision that we're already saving and conserving water. So I don't understand it.
Yeah.
Chad.
Agreed.
Come on.
Okay, I'm hearing some reservation here, so, I mean, realistically, council, I mean, you can continue to deliberate. I know you did earlier in the work meeting, but then we also have some options here, too. I mean, we don't have to act on this. We could actually table it and ask for our staff to go back to Weber Basin and do some negotiation on behalf of our residents, of those that do want to participate, rather than making this a full-on ordinance change just for the sake of following their rules, which, quite honestly, is superseding our ability to govern the city. And I think that's really the bottom line here, that this is really our city, and we should be able to make the best decision on behalf of the greater good of our city, as well as the full population and not just a few. So anyway, I could bring that back to you or tee that up for you if you'd want to make a motion that way.
That way? Can we just say that?
Can I address some of your guys' comments? Is that okay?
Yeah, we have not closed this public hearing on this. So
Sorry, I
you're
don't
welcome
come to
make a
these
comment.
very often. I should more, but as far as cost goes, so I didn't qualify for the Flip Your Strip because I don't have grass in my strip, so I don't qualify for that. And the cost for that program is a lower per square foot cost than this new one. So I've actually looked at the cost, and I will break even, or pretty close to breaking even, because the cost has increased for that rebate. I hear what you're saying about changing ordinances for everything, and per this graphic, your single-family dwellings that are not in a PUD are going down, and I don't know if you guys know why. So I'm an architect, and some of that is to buy land, to get architectural drawings, to find an independent contractor that will build it for you is expensive. Architectural drawings for a custom house, you're looking at 20 grand for just a simple house. And so that's why most of these are going for the PUDs and the developments, because the developer can put up that money and provide just a few floor plans that then homeowners can afford. So you're kind of limiting the small fraction of people that can afford the house and probably don't care for the grass in the front yard anyways, but you're limiting those that already live here and would like to make that change because they're buying houses that are already here in the city.
Okay. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. If not, council, do you want to take any action on item B? Or direction? Might be the other way to say that.
Maybe a question for Gary. If we want to go and get more information about this, maybe deliberate more with Weber Basin on options, would we move on to the next item? Would we table it? Motion to table?
You could table it to a date certain. You have advertised this, isn't that right? So that would prevent us from having to advertise again, re-advertise again. If you were to table it to a future date, choose a future date down the road, and give us some time to negotiate with Weber Basin and to talk with them about the issue. That would probably be the better.
Thanks. The reason I ask, as we discussed in the work meeting, I'd hate to vote down something like this if there's other options in the future, and we can still provide an opportunity for our residents to participate in the program. So with that, I'd make the motion that we hold this item or table this item.
Okay, do we have to have a date certain? Since it's a public hearing, so.
To 2 weeks from today.
Let me pose that question.
I would suggest, just because of our turnaround times to get information back to you, that we might want to go a little bit more than 2 weeks. I know people are anxious, but to have those conversations and get it back to you in a timely manner for our packets, I think it'd be a little tough.
Understand that.
July 20th.
Let's do July 20th. My motion to July 20th.
Is there a second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, you have it 4-1 in favor of tabling this item till a date certain of July 20. Okay, we'll move on to our last item of our public hearing, which is the acceptance of our budget for the fiscal year of 2023-2024, and Mr. Tracy Probert will present that to us.
Mayor, excuse me. Mayor, members of the council, tonight we're here to accept public comment on the 2023-2024 budget. On May 4th, we presented the tentative budget, and at that time established that tonight, June 1st, 2023, we would hold a public hearing where anyone who would like to comment on that budget is able to do that. So at this time, I would propose that you open a public hearing and then we accept public comment.
Okay. Our public hearing is open, so if anyone wishes to make a comment regarding our budget for the fiscal year, you're welcome to come up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and what your concerns or accolades are. Okay. Seeing that there's none, I'll bring it back to the council then for action. So council, I think you have a couple options here. You can leave the public hearing open, or you could go ahead and close it with this item. If you choose to close it with this item, then actually I'd entertain a motion to close all of our public hearing items. What's that? You have a choice. That's what I'm saying. You have two choices here.
Yeah, I'd like, leaving it open is probably a good idea.
Okay. So if that be the case, then I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing on item A. And we've already decided what we're doing with item B, and leave item C open until our next council meeting, which is June, 15th. Okay. So I need a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we close the public hearing for item A, adopt the Community Development Block Grant, Resolution 23-22.
We've already passed it, but we didn't close that.
Still okay?
Yeah.
And I move also that we keep the public hearing open for public comment on the Layton City budget for fiscal year 2023-2024.
Okay. Is there a
until next council meeting, June 15th.
Correct. Do I have a second? Okay, it's been moved in second that we close the public hearing on item A and keep the public hearing open on item number C. I'll go ahead and do well, actually, let's do a roll call vote. Councilmember Thomas?
Aye.
Good, you said the aye right. Okay, Councilmember Smith Edmondson?
Aye.
Councilman Morris?
Aye.
Councilman Bloxham?
Yes.
And Councilman Roberts?
Yes.
Okay, there you have it. Okay, council, is there any unfinished business at this time? If not, I do need a motion for us to close our council meeting, but then entertain a motion to go back into a work meeting for a closed session.
I move that we close the public meeting and that we go back into a closed door meeting for our work session.
Okay,
Second.
it's been moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We appreciate you participating in our council meeting this evening. We will, again.